Good morning, and thank you for participating in today's double feature webinar, Navigating Year-End Processing in Business Central and GP. A little about Forvis Mazars. We are an independent member of Forvis Mazars Global, a leading global professional services network. Ranked among the largest public accounting firms in the U.S., our team members are dedicated to providing an unmatched client experience through the delivery of assurance, tax, and consulting services. As part of the firm's consulting services, Business Technology Services provides analysis, design, implementation, upgrade, training, and support services for accounting and ERP systems and sales and marketing CRM systems. Our end-to-end solutions can help clients achieve their digital transformation goals. At a glance, these are the technologies Business Technology Services supports. Today, we'll be focusing on Microsoft Dynamics 365 Business Central and Dynamics GP ERP. Our presenters today are Nathan Hayden, a senior manager with our GP team, Jeremy Atkins-Hill, a managing consultant with our GP and Business Central teams, Ashley Simoneau, a senior consultant with our GP team, Molly Allman, a senior consultant with our Business Central team, and Jason Lane, who works our Dynamics SMB technology stack. So again, thank you for participating in today's webinar. I am going to turn over the presentation to Jeremy. And just a quick reminder for our audience, if you are here with us for the full 3.5 hours today, Yahoo, thank you for joining. The first hour will be dedicated to year-end processing in Microsoft Dynamics 365 Business Central. And the latter portion will be dedicated to doing the year-end close and updates in Dynamics GP. So with that, I'm going to turn over the presentation to Jeremy.
So our objectives for this webinar, we're gonna cover three main topics. But first, we're going to start in Business Central. We're going to talk about how to set up, process, and report on 1099 information in Business Central. We're going to identify effective strategies for closing the year in Business Central, including best practices for data accuracy, backups, and financial report review. And then we're going to jump to GP. We're going to talk about the year-end closing process in GP, including the general ledger, payables, receivables, payroll, fixed asset inventory. So all the subledgers that affect closing in GP. And then we'll also talk about describing the process for installing the year-end update in GP. And then we're gonna finish out today. What we don't have listed here is we're gonna talk about the free assessments, the GP to BC, GP to Business Central assessments that Microsoft is paying for. So those free ones. So we'll finish that out today. So on the BC side, I'll be presenting as well as Molly. Molly and I are both members of the BC team and help our clients in the closing and year-end process. So on our agenda specifically to BC, we're going to spend a little bit of time on 1099. We're going to talk about the month-end close. Then we're going to talk about the year-end close. Then a couple of things that happen after year-end close. Some activity we've seen some movement on the last couple of months is how do we post to a closed year? And then also, how do we reverse out a closed year if we need to make changes? And then because of the attendees here and a lot of organizations considering a move from GP to BC, as we transition off of the BC portion of today's webinar, I wanted to take just a few minutes and talk about the differences in the closing process between Business Central and GP. And that's specifically for those people in attendance today who are thinking about moving from GP to BC.
All right, we are at our first polling question, 1 of 14. So what's the hardest part of year-end close for you? So we're excited to see the answers here. A is Form 1099 processing. B is calculating and posting year-end journal entries. C, running year-end financials. Always fun. D, here for professional education. So please take a moment to lock in your response. And just a reminder as well, there's lots of great information in this presentation today. Feel free to download the PDF copy here or on our website. And we also have links to other helpful resources as well, linked here in the webinar platform. All right, and the results are in. Almost an even split.
All right, so jumping right in on the 1099 process. So anybody that's running payables inside of Business Central is going to have to process 1099s for those vendors being paid. With 1099 processing, you have a few different options. One is to do it right inside of Business Central. The good thing about doing it inside of Business Central is Business Central does offer that functionality to load that data from Business Central to the IRS directly. So if you came from GP, if you're considering coming from GP to Business Central, it's a little bit different between the two solutions. But specifically inside of Business Central, you can run your 1099s, and then you can load that data to the IRS. You also have the option, if you don't want to do 1099s inside of Business Central, to download the data and then take it to an outside processor. If you have a large amount of 1099s and you don't want to be responsible for processing all that data, you can take it outside of the system. So the focus today would be doing it on inside of the system. So real quickly, what is a 1099? At a very high level, it's just a collection of forms used to report any payments to the IRS where the recipient typically isn't an employee. So there's a bunch of different types of 1099s. I listed those all out here. We'll talk about in just a second the ones inside of Business Central. Business Central doesn't do all of these, but these are all of the different types. The types that we do in Business Central is going to be the 1099 dividends and distributions, the 1099 interest income, the 1099 miscellaneous income, and the non-employee compensation. If you need any of those other forms, so if we go back a slide, so any of these others, the A, the B, the C, G, the H, any of those other kinds, work with your tax professional, your tax team, and your Business Central partner, whoever that may be, and we'll come up with a solution for what that is. So another thing about 1099s is, along with 1099s, we also have the 1096s. So you can process 1096s inside of Business Central. That is an extension. So you do have to add that functionality inside of Business Central to be able to process it. And then what is the 1096? That's just the form that you transmit the 1099 data to the IRS. So 1099s go to the recipient, 1096s go to the IRS.
Yeah, so I think this is going to go over what Jeremy intends to demo, which he's going to show you how to set up the 1099s, the document and entries revolving the 1099s, and then reporting on 1099s. And then on the flip side, he'll enable, create, correct, print the 1096s. So he should be going over all of that in a little more detail too, and then he'll have a whole demo of that.
Excellent, thank you.
All right. And then let me share my screen.
We are looking at your Business Central homepage.
All right, perfect. So there's a couple of things, and I had that summary slide there. What I want to focus on today is the 1099 itself. So I'm going to stick to the 1099 and not the 1096s. If you have questions about the 1096s, please just let us know in the comments at the end, or our contact information will be shared. Reach out to us and we can talk about 1096s separately. I made some changes in the Business Central environment, and I'd rather just stick to the 1099s this morning. So the first thing with 1099s is the form box setups or the updates. So we're going to go to search, and we're going to search for 1099 form boxes. So these are all of the boxes that show on the 1099 itself. So what we need to do is come in to here first, and this is going to be pre-populated with the IRS thresholds. But if we want to report any differently, this is where we would make those changes. And then lastly, most importantly, each year before we do this, we need to update our form boxes. So it's just a button here. So once you come in here, you would simply just click on the button, and Business Central will reach out and grab any updates that need to be updated. So we can see here on the screen, you're compliant with the latest form of 1099 reporting. And we'll talk about this a few times in this webinar, but specific to 1099s, no changes this year from the IRS. So that would be the good part. So this is form boxes set up, the first part of the process. Next, what I want to talk about is setting up our vendors. So I'm going to go search vendors. We're going to select whichever vendor we want to work on. I'm just going to choose one off the list here. When it opens up the vendor card, we're going to go down to the Payments tab. Inside the Payments tab, in the IRS 1099 code, so like mine, if you come in and you don't see it, make sure to hit that Show More. And then here's the IRS 1099 code. We don't have anything set on this vendor today, which would tell us that this is not a 1099 vendor, so we would not be processing payments, 1099 payments for this vendor. Once you come in here, all of those codes that we saw set up in the form boxes setup, you would just pick which one applies. I'm just going to choose this one, whether it's right or wrong for this example, but this is how we would set up a vendor. Now at this point, we've set up our 1099, at least the formatting that we need and the options that we need. We've taken a look at the vendor, and we've said with that vendor where on the 1099 or what type of 1099 we want to process for. Next would be the processing part itself. So we're going to go back to search. I'm going to choose Purchase Invoice. So I'm going to pull up some that were previously entered. See if we have a good one out here. So this is that vendor that I just modified. So we want to go to shipping and payments. Going to show more, and then we just want to verify that the IRS 1099 code shows up here. This one shows up by default because this is who we chose for this vendor. If this is incorrect, or this is not to be included as a part of their 1099 data, we can either remove it or we can select a different code. So just because the vendor is identified as a 1099 vendor does not necessitate every transaction going towards their 1099 calculation. It could go to something different. It could be non-reportable as well. So that's the important part on that. So that's processing. And then obviously once we post and we go through the normal processing routine is when we would start to see this data show up. So I'm going to back out of this invoice. Kind of the next step in the process is correcting posted entries. So we're going to go back to the vendor again. We're going to take a shot on this one since there's a payment on the Reynolds group. We want to go to ledger entries. I apologize. Inside of ledger entries is where we're going to make these changes. On the ledger entries page, you'll find all of the, this is a non-1099. But on the ledger entries page is where you'll see all the 1099 information. If we've calculated something and posted it and we shouldn't have, that's where we would make those changes. I will try, while Molly's presenting, to find a vendor with some 1099 information, and then I can jump back in at that point and show you guys. But once we verified all of the vendor payment information, the last part is going to be processing the 1099 report itself. So to do that, we're going to go back to search. We're going to go back to the 1099 boxes. From this one, we want to go to reports. And then we have the different reports here that we can process. So the same 5 that I covered in the slide, it's going to be the dividends, the interest, the NEC, the miscellaneous. From here, you just simply select which one you want to process. And then just go through your normal processing routine. The printer, the print layout, check with your partner if you're not sure on these two. The calendar year that you want to do for, we can do a test print as well. And then I think the important part here is if you only want to do specific vendors, you can do specific vendors at a time. You have the option to send to, so we can send this to PDF. We can send it to Word, Excel. Excel would be important if you're going to load it into an external system, or if you just want to review the data in Excel. So I'm going to choose the NEC. And we don't have any data. So, but this would be the process here. Again, I'll try to find a vendor set up with some transactions while Molly's going through the year-end process. And if I can find something in this data set, this is the data set for Microsoft, then I'll jump back in at the end. So quickly, what was just covered, setting up the 1099s, reviewing information, and then printing the 1099 forms. If you have questions on how do we process the data and get it to the IRS, again, please reach out, and we'd be happy to go through that with you. And Molly, I'll turn it over to you.
Okay, thanks, Jeremy. So I'm going to cover a few things. Our first step will be just a month-end close to just talk about those kind of steps you need before a full year-end close. So we'll go to my next slide. So some things you want to consider when you're doing your month end is posting all your journal entries you need for that month. That includes payment journals, reoccurring journals, any general journal items that you might need to post. Posting deposits is another one. And if you have fixed assets, you'll want to run that depreciation for that month, all necessary bank recs. And then the next two are what's going to help you from containing users from posting in months and years in the wrong time periods. So in the general ledger setup, there's allowed to and from posting dates that you can set for the entire company. And then you get a little more specific in the user setup where you can set user specific dates. So maybe you only want Bob to be allowed to post in December, but Jerry can post in November and December. So you can have those more specific dates on the user setup. And that helps close the periods when you don't want certain people closing in previous dates. So now we'll move into the closing the year in Business Central. So again, a lot of this is going to be similar. You'll want to kind of do your monthly stuff as well, where you're posting your journal entries, payments, and running depreciation, any kind of reports you may need, and then you move into the closing of the year. So in that, you'll have to first close an accounting period and then create a new accounting period if it's not already created. You'll just create the next 12 months of what your year-end close is, and then you'll run a process of closing the income statement where you select your retained earnings account, what journal you want to post to, any dimension breakdown that needs to be considered, and then you'll just calculate it, and the system just processes everything from income statements accounts and does all the journal entries for you, breaks it down as you need to, and then totals that amount and moves it to retained earnings. Once you've run all of this and posted, reviewed, and make sure you review, and then posted the closing of the income statement entries, that's when you'll want to go and close those periods for, again, the general ledger setup, which is all of Business Central, or the user setup, which is more specific to users. So a lot of people have a question if you can post to a closed year. The answer is you can. The only thing that would stop you is those posting dates. So you'll want to be really specific on who can do that. A lot of the time you always have adjusting entries a few months later, whenever it is. So you can open up probably like your own dates or whoever's doing it to post in that year. If it does hit any income statement accounts, you can run the closed income statement anytime you want. It's just going to move whatever in those income statement accounts and put it in retained earnings. It doesn't have to be right at that time you're doing everything. You can do that whenever, if something is posted to there. And then you'll just want to make sure to close off your dates again, or whoever it is doing it, so they don't have that posting in the previous year. Okay. And it looks like we have a polling question, and that is, have you ever had to open a closed year before? I think a lot of people have this question all the time, and it's pretty scary if you can't, because you always have adjusting entries.
Right. Molly, what's your over under? You think it's over 50%?
I think, oh yeah, there's always adjusting entries. Always. I would think it's pretty high of yes.
We'll have to see.
But
Yes.
we'll see.
And for our audience,
Yeah.
we are on attendance check / polling question number 3. So have you ever had to open a closed year? And we see it a lot. Just curious what your response is.
Yes. I'll be shocked if it's always no.
Right. And you made it sound so simple on your last slide. It's like, oh yeah, just do this and make sure it's closed. Bada bing, bada boom.
It's pretty daunting, but it's pretty easy.
Oh, wow.
Okay.
Only 46 saying yes. All right.
Wow. I guess people are pretty good and don't have too many adjusting entries like I thought. But that's good. Okay, so let's move on to the next slide. Reversing out a closed year. This one I don't see as often as maybe posting adjusting entries to a closed year. But if something went wrong and you need to reverse out that entire batch you just did in Business Central, you are able to do that. All you would need to do is go to your GL registers, that's plural, and find the batch that is your close year entry, and you would just press reverse. This would post reversing entry, so you would see in your general ledgers entries the posting and then the reversal, but that will put everything back where it was before, and you'd be able to close the period correctly or whatever it is. Okay, so are we ready for the demo? I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen. Okay, I also wanted to show you guys where in the vendor ledger entries you can update that, which Jeremy I know was looking for. But it's very important that you go to the specific vendor you want. You don't want to go to vendor ledgers total because it doesn't have that editable field for the 1099. So you'll want to come up here to vendor ledger entries. If you went to the balance or anything or the payment field, again, the 1099 field will not be editable. So you need to come up here to ledger entries where everything that this vendor has done has been listed. So then you can scroll over until you find the 1099 field, which are these two fields. And that's where you can then decide what IRS code this should be. And you also can put the amount that should be reported to the IRS. So it would just be in the specific vendor ledger entries. Okay, so now I'm going to back out. And the first thing you want to do when you're closing your year is go to accounting periods. And that will be this one right here. So we can see I have all my other years closed until 2024, and I do not have my 2025 created yet. So I am first going to close my year, and that's just going to verify what year I'm closing for. So beginning of January to end of December for 2024, I'm going to say yes. If something turned out wrong, where maybe this said 1/31/24 instead of 1/1/2024, you can't, but you've already closed it. It doesn't allow you to just change it there because the period is technically closed. So you would need to reopen that. To do this, you would need to use a configuration package and push the data in as true. So it's a little funky, but there is a way to do that. So the next thing I want to do is create my year of 2025. So I'm going to come up here to create year. I can see my starting date will be 1/1/2025. Number of periods I want is 12, and the period length is 1 month. And then I'm just going to press OK. And then we can see it's created my new year, and it's checked off my new fiscal year for 2026. Okay, So my next step would be to close the income statement. Of course, before doing any of this, you would want to make sure, again, any journal you need is posted, depreciate fixed assets, run reporting if you need it to before closing the income statement. So kind of those month-end processes again before running this if you need to. So then I'm just going to type in close income statement, and I don't even need to type in the full thing. I can see it's right here. So I can see my fiscal year ending date is 2024. If I had not updated closed my accounting period, you would not have seen this date updated. It would have still been for 2023. So you would not have been able to do this step unless you closed the accounting periods. So if you're doing this for your first time, you would see your general journal template as blank. So you would just have to do this drop down, and I'm going to put it in a general journal batch. Then I created a batch called year end. You can also just create a new one if you want, or put it in any other ones you might have already. And then I'm just going to change my document number to 2024, close. I have my retained earnings account. And then you have the options of posting a detail, close income statement entries, or balance. I'm going to choose balance. I'm going to update my posting description to 2024. And then down here, dimensions. I have a lot of dimension restrictions on my GLs. So I just went ahead and chose these dimensions to break down the entries by. So if you have like restrictions on department, make sure you check that off. Otherwise, you're going to get a lot of errors during your process that will say you need to have a department dimension attached to these entries. So this will help break the amounts down per dimension as well. Once you have this set up once, it's going to remember the setup. So you probably will just need to update the document number and posting description for next year. So I can go ahead and press OK. And we can see it's moved my journal lines. So I just need to press OK and navigate to my general journal. Okay, so we can see the posting date's a little different than a usual posting date. It has C for close, and then the posting date of the end of the year. We have our document number, and then it's moving all our retained earnings account. So we can see if there was any dimensions right here that it's going to break that down by, and it would put anything else in there if we had that. So you want to make sure to review this, and I'm just going to click on one of these lines and then do Control N to bring me all the way down to the page instead of scrolling. It's a nice little trick. And that's where I can see the total of my retained earnings. If you have, for some reason, I know some people have a little different process for retained earnings. Maybe you need to break it into 2 accounts or something like that. Or you need to break this out by dimension, maybe department-wise. You can change this amount and put in each department. Maybe you needed like 25% of this in 4 different departments. So you'd be able to edit this field, add dimension lines, and add a few more lines. So this stuff is editable. You can also preview post this before you need to, but if everything looks good, then we can go ahead and press post. And of course, verify. And we can say yes to that. Posting date's not within my range. So I'm going to go ahead and open that up in my general ledger setup. I'm just going to clear that out. And I also know I've set myself up in the user setup page. So I'm just going to clear out my end date there. And now we can see that has successfully posted. So if I needed to post adjusting entries, I could go to my general ledger setup where we just saw, or user setup, and I would just post my entry that I need and run that close income statement process again. I would not need to close my accounting periods again. That's a one-time thing. You just need to do that once, and then you can run your closed income statement at any time. If I needed to reverse out that batch, I could go to G/L registers, if I could spell. So it's going to be this plural one. This is going to have all of our journal batches that we've ever done. And we would just want to find that entry, that batch, which you can easily filter the list down by. I knew it was done in the journal batch name year YE. So I could come to journal batch name in YE and enter, and that would be my list. If I wanted to reverse this out, I would just do reverse register. This would pop open another screen where you can then verify the entries it's bringing up, and you would reverse from there. And you would have a reversing entries in your general ledger entries. So that is how you would reverse it. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing now.
Molly, before you end, well, the demo, can you just talk to best practices about printing 1099 forms? We have that question from Cheryl.
Yeah, so Cheryl, you should be able to print those 1099 forms. If I saw it says that your vendor 1099 is not updated. So let me share my screen really quick again. So that's under, what is it, reports? Forget the exact name. There's a spot that says update form boxes. Oh, here we go. Sorry, that's for 1099.
No, thank you for showing this.
Okay, here we go. So you could do update form boxes if there was a update to it. If there is not, and maybe it still looks off, I would say contact your partner and they can make those adjustments in the form. But yeah, you should be able to print these and you don't have to send them via email. So you saw where Jeremy said like, or you could print a PDF or any of that, you could have that option, or you can just press print and that will print them as you need, and then you can send them.
And one thing that's important to remember is the pre-printed 1099 forms don't necessarily look like the 1099 forms that come out of the system, whether it be GP or BC. What's important is the data that's on there. So as long as we have all the data that's required by the IRS, we're okay. But Cheryl, I would reach out to your partner if just to be certain. And we're always happy to jump on a call and answer a question as well.
Yes. Okay. So that concludes my side of the demo. And so just to go over what we've covered again is that year-end process, posting any journal entries you need to before, creating and closing that accounting period. And then it shows how easily you can just run that closed income statement. It is a really nice, simple process to close the year in Business Central. You just have to press run close income statement and it creates all those entries for you. So it's super, super easy. I heard GP is a little more lengthy to say. And then just make sure you update those posting dates just so you don't have anyone posting in that year that you don't want to. And you are able to open posting dates and post those adjusting entries as you need. And if you just find yourself, maybe there's some entries in that closed income statement, maybe throughout the year you see that someone's posted that, you can close that income statement any time of the year. It will just, and again, even for like past years, if something posted in 2022 that wasn't supposed to be, you can then run the closed income statement for 2022. You just need to make sure your accounting period is closed. And again, if something went totally wrong, you can update your GL, or you can reverse out a closed year completely. It's as simple as going to GL registers, finding that batch, and just reversing out that. Instead of reversing out each specific entry, that will reverse the entire thing, and you can just start from scratch. if you find yourself in your accounting periods and the periods look wrong, maybe the date is wrong on the starting date, you can use a configuration package that takes that information out. You can switch where it says accounting period closed from true to false, and then push that information back in. I know I've had to do that a couple times, and you get a little nervous because it's not just a button you can just check off. So the configuration package is a nice way to just redo that if you need to. Okay, I'm going to go pass it off to the GP presenters, and they will help you with the year-end close from there.
Before we do that, I wanted to take just a few minutes here and talk about the close between GP and Business Central. So what are the key differences? And specifically for those users considering, what would that look like moving forward? So, and again, why would we consider this, right? And it's really just about kind of that visibility and understanding for those GP users considering making the move, whether that be sooner or later down the road. So what I did is I pulled out just a few things here, things that are like those key differences from a functionality standpoint. You could see a little bit in the demonstration how things are different than GP, but like those key bullet points. So Form 1099 electronic filing, that's native functionality inside of Business Central. On the GP side, it requires that ISV or external solution. So something like Green Shades or there's a few different options that Nathan and Ashley will go over here in a few minutes. As far as form changes go, inside of Business Central, we really go to the form boxes and we hit that button to update the form boxes. Inside of GP, all of those form changes are handled via that year-end update that Microsoft releases. And earlier I said there's not a form update this year. That's not 100% accurate. There was a form change, but it was the instructions on the back side of the report. So anybody generating the 1099 out of whether it's GP or Business Central, you can still generate the 1099. If you're sending the instructions, you can always go to the IRS website and print the instruction pages from there would be the easiest way to handle it. So that was the one change this year. Database backup. Inside of Business Central, prior to running 1099s, there is no database backup needed. Inside of GP, we say required, but it's highly recommended that prior to doing any changes, and by required, what I'm specifically talking about is prior to running that year-end update to get those form changes. Data maintenance. Again, there is no formal data maintenance process inside of Business Central. So for those GP users, what we're talking about is check links and reconcile. And in GP, that's always recommended as a part of that year-end process. It's just a good time to do it generally if you're not doing it monthly anyways. Number of required steps in the closing process. As you saw what Molly went through, there's really three main processes. Inside of GP, where we're going to spend 60 to 120 minutes going through the year-end process. And there's many steps on the GP side. So Business Central really just consolidated down that closing process. Payroll tax updates. There's no integrated payroll inside of Business Central. There are ISV solutions. Those ISV solutions make it look like payrolls inside of Business Central, but it is not core Business Central functionality. Inside of GP, as many of you should be aware, there is integrated payroll inside of GP. The important part about payroll, and Ashley and Nathan will go over this again here in a few minutes, but you run your payroll tax update after your last payroll of the year before your first of the next year. So after your last 2024 payroll, before your first 2025. Critical that it's done in that window, and that window may be very small. Remove history. Just really data cleanup and data maintenance. That's recommended on both sides of the table, whether it's Business Central or GP, just to keep the system robust and running as smoothly as possible. Once you're outside the window of IRS reporting requirements, potential audits, any historical stuff, there's ways and places we can move that data to, but kind of getting it out of that production company is what we mean by recommended. Subledger closing. As you saw in Business Central, there was no actual subledger closing process. On the GP side, it's not required for all of the subledgers, but it is for some. System downtime for users. There's really no way to quantify this, but inside of Business Central, there is no required downtime. So you can actually do your year-end close inside of Business Central with users logged in and working. Inside of GP, we do have to have people out of the system, and the length of time is just however long it takes to complete the closing process. It could be a couple of hours, kind of best case with backups and all of that stuff. And it could, span, a day or more. And again, total time investments, a few hours to a day inside of Business Central if you're going back and cleaning up data. And then in GP, it can be multiple days. So at a very high level.
All right.
Sarah,
So Jeremy, so we're officially wrapping up the year-end processing and Business Central portion of today's webinar. So we're on polling question 4, and it is, would you like to connect with us to learn more about Business Central and year-end processing? So if you have specific questions, check yes, please contact me. If you're interested in learning more, again, please check yes. Feel free to drop any questions in the chat too, while we have Molly here to help answer those questions. And
I did see one. Sorry, Sarah.
Please, by all means.
It says, how would you perform the year for AP fiscal year close for AP different than GP? So you don't have to specifically close like anything for that. You would just verify that your accounts payable, GL accounts matches like everything for your vendor, and same with AR. So you don't have to do anything specifically in Business Central to close that. All you have to do to close Business Central is those few steps we did. So you would just want to make sure everything matches for AP and AR.
Excellent. And as we get to the top of the hour for this Business Central portion, can you just repeat the three processes for year-end processing in Business Central?
Yeah, of course. So you will first want to go to accounting periods and close your year and create a new year. And then you will run your close income statement process. That's where we set our filters and everything. You set your retained earnings, and then you would process that calculation, and it's going to move everything to your journal that you selected. You would then go to that journal, review your entries, and then make sure that looks good. If it does, you can post that. And then if you just want to be extra clean, you can set up those allowed to posting dates in the general ledger setup. And if you want to be more specific to users, in the user setup, so no one can post in that year.
Excellent. Looks like we have one more question. How would the year-to-date amounts paid be updated, or is that not an option, no longer there?
I'm guessing, I'm guessing they mean for 1099. So maybe Jeremy, he will know the comparisons. Do you know that one?
Yeah, so inside of Business Central, there's no specific fields for year-to-date amounts paid. That's calculated where we need it to be calculated when we run reports and things like that. On the GP side, those are pre-populated fields in the database, so just a little bit different functionality between the two systems.
Excellent.
I think that's what we were talking about.
Yeah. And it does have that, if this is related to 1099s, in those vendor ledger entries, if anything was missed, you can set it to the 1099 code and then say the amount paid to the IRS. So you can set that as well. Any tips for posting a large entry? Yeah, $60,000 is a lot. Make sure, I would say, if you're doing detailed, I'd switch it to balance. That will help it. Otherwise, well, I guess you could because you could do it in batches where you delete part of the lines and then change your retained earnings. And then if you still run your closed income statement, it will see ones that haven't been closed and you could scroll it in that way. I would also make sure you're not doing where it shows balance or detail, because detail will be a lot of lines versus balance would just be the chunk it needs. That might be a little easier.
Awesome advice. And that question was about posting to a journal entry that has over 60,000 lines. So that was so that was those are good tips. So all right, so we are wrapping up our Business Central. It looks like we have answered all the questions in the Q&A thus far. So thank you, Jeremy. Thank you, Molly. Molly, the demo was fantastic, and we are going to be back in 5 minutes. So the second portion of today's webinar will be about the year-end processing and closing in Dynamics GP. So part 1 with our Business Central is complete. Part 2 is yet to come.
I see a late question came in for Business Central about running multiple dimensions and if it closes GL by dimension as well. If you select it to close the dimension, and is it okay if I pull up my screen, Sarah?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Let me show that answer for Tiffany.
All right, audience, just to clue you in too, if you're coming back off a break, we had a late Business Central question, so Molly's going to do a quick demo.
Yes. So you can come to right here by dimensions and just select your dimensions that you want to break it down by. And that will take your lines that you've entered and split them up as needed. So yes, it will do that for you.
Excellent, thank you. And then we have a great article from another Business Central team member about dimensions in Business Central. So I'll make sure that's included in the archive email going out today too, to help lend some understanding to those dynamic tools in Business Central. And with that, we are now to the second portion of today's webinar, navigating year-end processing in Business Central and GP. So, leading our Microsoft Dynamics GP portion of today's presentation are Nathan Hayden and Ashley Simino. And Jeremy will have a guest appearance in this section as well. So he started with our GP team and is learning BC, as many of our consultants are. So a nice, well-rounded team. And with that, I am going to hand it over to Nathan.
All right, thank you. Good morning, everybody. So buckle up. The GP portion of this is going to be pretty substantial. Those of you that are longtime users of GP are familiar with this. And I'm sure you're here just to get a good refresher for this process that you do just once a year. We know it's really critical for how you manage GP and your accounting operations. So we want to make sure to give you thorough and complete information. There may be some of you that are going through this process the first time. We understand that although GP is a mature product that's been in the market for a number of years, you may have inherited GP and responsibility for doing the year end by virtue of a new job or promotion at your current job. So again, we want to be thorough because there are a lot of details to this and a lot of potential to get yourself into a jam. So hopefully this will be useful for you. We are planning to spend about 2 hours on this. We're going to cover just some quick introductions of our team. We'll talk about the future of Dynamics GP. That's been a matter of a lot of speculation over the past few years, and Microsoft has finally settled that for us, and we'll share that with you. Ashley will talk about new features that are available in the October 2024 release of GP. Microsoft's done a good job over the years of providing additional functionality for the GP product, and Ashley will share that with you. I'll spend some time going over the technical components of installing the GP year-end hotfix. I'll give you some information about preparation, backups, some potential troubleshooting items. That's an item that a lot of times clients will call us to help with, but if your IT team has done it in the past or you're comfortable doing that, we'll give you the information to do it yourself. We'll bring Jeremy back in to talk about inventory. That's definitely one of his areas of expertise, and so we want to use that knowledge before he completely abandons us for the Business Central product. But he'll go over that. We'll talk about how you close Receivables Management, and then Payables Management, Fixed Assets, and then the granddaddy, the General Ledger. We just want to make sure to cover all of those subledgers or those sub-modules before we get to GL, because they all impact that. And then Payroll, which is kind of its own thing, but obviously a big reason why you would want to do the year-end update, and that you would have done it in the past, is for those payroll updates. And then we'll have some Q&A time. If you have questions as we go through each of these sections, feel free to drop those in chat, and we'll try to address those as best we can. Hopefully the audio is good, but if you're having any issues with hearing us at any point, please let us know that as well. We know technology isn't always perfect on a Monday morning. So before we get into the future of Dynamics GP, I'll ask Ashley to just introduce herself briefly. Ashley, tell the folks how long you've been here, kind of your background that brought you here.
Sure. Hey, everybody. Hope you guys are doing good on a Monday. I've been with Forvis for almost two years, I guess. Been doing GP support for, almost 20, and I was a user for many, many years before that. So yeah. We'll be talking to you guys here shortly.
All right, thanks. And I'm Nathan. I've been with this firm for 14 years. Officially, tomorrow is my anniversary, actually. When I started, we were BKD. Then we became Forvis for a very short time. That's when Ashley came along. So, and now we're Forvis Mazars. So, a lot of changes for us. Yeah, happy to go through this. All right, let's talk about the future of Dynamics GP. I would say it's clear but finite. And those of us that have used GP for a long, long time, we know it well, we like it, it's familiar, it's comfortable, but unfortunately, technology has sort of passed it by. It's still a great product. We expect it to be a great product until it reaches its official end. But on September 25th of this year, Microsoft did formally and officially announce that support for the product would end. And that date is fixed at September 30th of 2029. So a little less than 5 years from now. And again, that's been the subject of a lot of speculation and rumors over the past few years. And we've continued to tell people that we're here to support you as you use Dynamics GP for as long as it's viable, and we certainly want to make sure you continue to get good value out of the product, but we also want you to recognize the reality that it's not going to be available forever. You may hear people say that, well, it'll run well past the 2029 date, and Microsoft even has said that they'll provide critical security updates until April 30/31. But just understand that this means that if you wait until 2029 and you get to November, December, and you ask, well, where's the year-end update webinar? Where's the year-end closing webinar for GP? There won't be one. Microsoft will not be releasing that October update that they've been doing. They won't release the year-end update that they have always done. You're just not going to get that in 2029. So we just really want to encourage you to look at a modern replacement for GP. You've got plenty of time to do it, but we would advise you not to wait until the last minute to do that. Microsoft does have a support and services blog. It's labeled as Dynamics 365, and you can find more information about end of support there. Okay, and Thomas Schatzenzer, you've noticed a typo. So 2031, of course, yeah, not 3031. If they do, that's fine. I won't be around for it. Also, somebody mentioned something about an echo, so I don't know if that's still an issue, or was that from earlier?
I think that was earlier. You sound good on my end.
Oh, good?
And
okay.
yeah,
right.
And then to our audience, if you are experiencing any audio visual issues, please try refreshing your browser. That usually fixes all the issues.
Thanks. All right. Yeah, I was just scrolling through questions, so I want to make sure I didn't miss anything there. All right. And this is just a graphical representation of the roadmap. So we're going to have end of support here, end of any regulatory updates. So again, if there are changes to 1099s, any tax forms, those kinds of things, any compliance issues, well, those are not going to be available at the end of that year. So your last year to get those really will be 2028. And then this is when the security updates end. All right.
Hey, Nathan, can I ask one question real quick?
Sure.
Payroll tax updates, those also stop in 2029, or do we have any information on payroll tax updates?
Well, no updates on that. Yeah, I'd say it's possible they released that update file, that CAB file that provides those rates, and there are ways to update those tax tables manually. I wouldn't count on it. You know, it may be part of their overall update strategy is to just not do that either. And obviously, anything after September, I mean, we would need updates after September. So if Microsoft isn't releasing those, I think you're putting yourself at some jeopardy.
Okay, thank you.
Polling question. Oh,
Yeah, so yeah, this is the first polling question for the second portion of today's webinar, and it is, what's the hardest part of year-end close for you? And the answer options are A, reconciling accounts, B, generating and reviewing financial reports, C, updating and closing all modules, which is extensive in GP, and we're going to cover a lot of that today. Or D, here to catch up with professional education. And that's okay. We're here to help you learn more about accounting systems, accounting technology, and all that wonderful stuff and information.
We have CPE to do as well, so we know what it's like this time of year to try to get all that in.
All right, absolutely. All right, the results are in. It's a pretty even split, leaning heavier on the reconciling accounts. And so with that, I will hand it back to you.
All right, thank you. Ashley, tell us about new features in the October 2024 release. Yeah,
so this year, Microsoft has actually released about 10 new key features across the core modules. Some of these are going to be pretty exciting to our tenured users. The first one is the default vendor class now has a no option in the roll down. So previously, when you made changes to a vendor class, you had yes or cancel, which often caused problems. But now we have the option to say no. So if we don't want to roll it down to all of our vendors within a class, we can say no, yes, or cancel. So this is a good one for our payables folks. They've also added an EFT payment register in the reprint posting journals. So this is new. So if you have to reprint your posting journals after a check run, you will get an EFT payment register. So this is also going to be really handy for those folks processing EFT. They've also added the masking of 1099 tax ID numbers, which, a lot of our 1099 contractors use their social security numbers for their tax ID numbers. So now when we print those 1099 forms, the first 5 digits of the tax ID will be masked with an X. So this is going to be, definitely a nice feature and much more secure for those folks getting 1099s. All right. There's also now an option in the documents drop-down for the calendar year paid that allows you to filter based on a specific calendar year. So this is good if you want to look at history, current, whatever year that you're trying to get data on. There is also a new zoom on the 1099 details window that allows you to open the edit 1099 transaction restriction by year. So this allows you to find, that 1099 specific data for a specific year much more quickly and efficiently. So this is also going to be a great feature for our payables folks. And this is a big one that I see a lot in support. Historical age trial balance will now print if you have a special character in the voucher number or document number. It's always been an issue that if somebody, uses a character in one of those fields, the historical age trial balance report won't print correctly, and we usually have to go into the tables to correct those, and it's a real big mess. But they've actually fixed it now, so this report will print if we're using characters. All right, and then we also have the vendor remit to address information is going to be saved when the payables transaction is posted. So now if you want to drill back down on an invoice, you can see what actual remit to invoice information is used at the transaction level. So this is going to be really beneficial for you guys out there. And a couple more. All right, we've got the payroll monthly deduction and benefit maximums. So this is a functionality that payroll admins have been waiting for. New fields have been added to the payroll benefit and deduction setup, as well as the payroll employee deduction and benefits windows. So this new added functionality is going to be very similar to the way that the maximums currently work, but now we have these more fields. So this is going to be really great for our payroll folks. All right, and then we've got the purchase order entry line detail option. So you can now delete at the line level instead of having to delete your PO, start over, all that stuff. You can now just delete a line entry and then keep going. So this is going to be a really great feature for you guys. And then I believe this is 2 more. Okay, so the next one is going to be when you enter a certain transaction type in the sales transaction entry and select the print option, the system will now default the SOP print options based on the document type. So if you're an invoice, you go to print the document, it's going to automatically default to the invoice type. If you're in a quote, you go to print, it's going to automatically default to the print type. So no more having to, go choose which document you want when you're in the print feature. It's automatically going to default for you. All right. And our last feature is, with this release, all the reports in the navigation list will now let you print and email mass reports simultaneously. Prior to the 18.7 release, which is the one that's just released in October, you could only do some of the list, like the sales order transaction list had this ability, but now it's all the reports listed in the navigation list. So this is going to be really great as well. All right, Nathan, I'm going to hand it back over to you.
Okay, sounds good. So I do see one question about how to get the October 2024 release. I'll go over that in this section and explain that. And then there was a question about any product that does some of the basic functionality that you're currently using in GP. And at the end of the presentation, we'll go over an offering that's out there right now to do an assessment, kind of a basic assessment to figure out if maybe the Business Central product is a good replacement for GP. We have some other options as well, and our business development team, specifically Jason, who's on the call, can connect with you on that. So here's some important notes about the hot fix, and this is specifically referring to the software that you have to download to install the year-end update for GP. It is available as a standalone download, and this is the file name. For those of you on the call that are more technical, you may recognize that MSP extension as a patch file rather than an executable. So this does just patch the GP installation. There's also a full, complete GP installation file called MD October 2024. It's got the same naming that all of the previous full installers have had. The new version is 18.7.1756. I do want to point out that the year-end update was released after the October 2024 release. So even if you did the update that they provided in October, you'll still want to do this latest hotfix. They are slightly different. However, they are cumulative. So if you did not do the October 2024 update, or even if you're on an older version like 18.4, all you need to download and install is the latest year-end update. You don't have to install all of the intermediate versions to get to 18.7. In terms of preparation, you want to make sure that you verify that any customizations that you have for GP are upgraded. There may be some customizations that don't require an upgrade to work with 18.7, but if you have the source code or if you're still in contact with the developer that provided that, it's a good practice to make sure that you get a new version of it just to be safe. And then make sure any third-party products are available and compatible. Sometimes the ISV publishers are a little bit behind Microsoft, and they may need an extra few weeks to release their latest versions. So we're not going to cover all of those. There are just way too many of them, and you may be using things that we aren't even familiar with. It's a pretty big ecosystem, but thinking about some of the more common ones like a Macorma, maybe the HR and payroll products from Integrity Data, some of the E1 Solutions products like Smart List Builder. Those are just some examples, but anytime you go through this year-end update process, you definitely want to check with all those ISV publishers and make sure that they've released the 18.7 compatible versions of those. It's not any fun to launch into doing your GP year-end update and get through that process and then get ready to install a third-party product only to find out that, oh, there isn't a new version available yet. That can create a real bind. And then I'll show you, we've got some resources at the end of each section that provide the URLs for downloads and so forth. And I'll also show you that when we do a demo of the hotfix installation. Here's just a real brief summary timeline of of preparing for your hotfix installation. So, of course, you're going to download it, download all your ISV products. If you'll do these 2 steps before you do anything else, actually we can include 3 in this as well, the customizations. If you'll do all those, you'll have a lot of confidence that you're not going to get into that situation I just described, where you're partway through the update only to realize that you didn't have one of the ISV products you needed, or that it wasn't available in the latest version. So, follow this roadmap, follow this template for how you work through the process, and you'll be fine. I always like the expression "measure twice, cut once." Just double check all these preparations and prerequisites. Another important step is to identify all the GP client endpoints that are to be updated. Depending on how you have GP configured, you may have just a SQL server and a remote desktop server, maybe 2 remote desktop servers. It's also possible that you've got the GP client installed on a bunch of workstations or laptops. You may have a mix of those 2. You may have a Citrix server. Make sure to just do a quick inventory of any devices where users expect to be able to run GP, and make sure that you list those and that you address those as part of this update. If you're in a situation where you do have that remote desktop server or a Citrix server, as well as a mix of desktops and laptops, it's okay to sort of string that update process out as long as users know where they can go to log in. So if you need an extra day to maybe get their laptops updated, or if somebody is working from home and they need to bring that in, certainly not a problem, as long as you just kind of have a strategy for addressing how users are going to use GP after you're done. And that's important because once you install this update, any of the GP clients that have not been updated will not work. So if somebody still has GP 18.6 on their laptop and you've already upgraded the server to 18.7, nobody that uses 18.6 can log in anymore. So once you have that list, keep that on hand. Back up all the GP databases. That's going to include the Dynamics database. Select the system to use for the update. This will often be the SQL server. This is going to be the first machine that gets updated, and this is where the actual update process will be executed from. Make sure to back up the GP program folder. I like to do this because if something goes wrong with the GP hotfix installation or a third-party product, you can just simply delete the GP folder and then put the backup folder back in place, and that puts you back at that 18.6 or whatever your prior version was. So that's an easy way to recover without having to go through a reinstall process, because there isn't an easy way to just uninstall the hotfix. You really have to, or the easiest way is to just have that program folder backed up. Also have a good backup of your modified forms and reports. There are multiple ways to do this, and I'll show you some options for that. And then schedule adequate downtime. We are asked to do this update for a lot of our clients, and one of the questions we always get is, how long is it going to take? And that's a tough question to answer. We do have a way to look at how long the database processing took for your last update, and we compile a pretty good estimate as we work through these for different clients. So we know that this year average is probably going to be in the 15 to 20 minute range per database. But again, those types of things are going to depend on the processing speed of your server and whether you encounter any errors or not. So I always tell people that you should plan on a day. If it goes faster than that, that's great. That's a bonus. We have worked with clients in the past that have hundreds of GP companies, and a day just isn't adequate for that. If you're in a situation where you have a large number of companies, there are some strategies for minimizing the amount of time that takes. Things such as using multiple machines to process all those databases. But if you've got questions about how you can reduce that time, let us know, and we can give you some options there. But I never like to tell somebody, yeah, we'll have this done in a couple hours, and then we run into some strange error message, and now the whole day's shot and trying to troubleshoot. And we've overbooked ourselves based on a low ball estimate, and then the client's not happy because they were expecting to be back in later that day to start running reports or doing processing. So give yourself plenty of time. Some additional recommendations for how you start this is make sure that nobody's logged into GP. You can look at the user activity window in GP. You can also look at the Dynamics activity table. Another thing that you'll want to do is to make sure that the GP executable, the GP program, is closed on all workstations and servers. And you can look for Dynamics.exe in Task Manager. This might be more common when you're running Remote Desktop Server or Citrix. It's not fatal if somebody still has Dynamics.exe open, or if there's a suspended session where they're not fully logged off, but it can complicate things and lead to some manual effort. So that's just some good technical hygiene just to make sure that that's all closed. Then you'll apply the year-end hotfix. You'll update your GP databases via GP utilities. After you apply that hotfix and you try to launch GP, it'll tell you that you have to run utilities. So you'll have to run through that utilities process. The first time that you do it, you're going to see a message about needing to update your databases. It'll update the Dynamics database, and then you'll select all of your companies to update. That only happens once. Once that's complete, and you move on to your workstations and your additional endpoints, the only thing that utilities does is just verify that the version of the client that you have installed matches what's on the database server. So in terms of those time estimates for this whole process, I typically expect maybe 10 minutes per workstation. So that's another piece you want to make sure to add to your schedule. The modified forms and reports should update automatically. If you go back to that step about making sure that GP is closed everywhere, this is the piece that won't happen automatically if somebody still has GP open and they're using a shared location for those forms and reports. That file will be considered open, and GP can't actually do that update. And I'll show you how you can double check that when we go through the demo. And then you'll install the updated ISV products. If you look at your documentation for your ISV products, some of them will recommend uninstalling the current version. And I've found over the years that that's a pretty good practice. It usually works to install over the top of the old version, but not always. But if you again review those install notes for each product, it'll give you the best guidance for that. Some of your ISV products are going to require you to actually do SQL updates as well, and most of them will pop up a window and say you also need to update some tables for this product to work properly. So just be sure to follow those prompts and pay attention to those windows as they come up. Those will add additional time. Some of those products can update the tables for all companies at one time from just a single company. There are a few, and I'm not going to quote any names because I don't want to be wrong, but there may be a few where you actually have to log into each company individually and process those SQL object updates from within each company. Those are inconvenient, but it's not a bad idea to open up multiple companies after this process completes, just to make sure that there are no messages about that. and then you'll repeat the installation steps for all of your endpoints. So applying the hotfix, installing the ISV solutions, installing your customizations, and then launching GP utilities and the GP client to verify that the update was successful. So I want to take just a minute to go over backups. This is, I would say, the most critical process to do during the installation of the hotfix, but then later as we go through the actual functional steps of closing each module in GP, it's equally as important there. And we're going to recommend that you do backups at various points throughout the instructions for how to close the modules. These backups are going to let you redo a small portion of the overall process without having to restart from the beginning. So if you're closing receivables or payables and something doesn't go quite right, and you're like, wow, it'd be really nice if I could just do that again, a backup lets you do that. We know that, for example, several years ago, Microsoft introduced the ability to reopen a closed year, which is a great feature, but you shouldn't rely on that for recovering from an error. I have one example from recent history where a client encountered an error during their year-end close for one company. They used AA extensively, and there was some sort of a duplicate key error that they got. They had a lot of companies to close, so they chose to just sort of skip past it. They ran a few reports and thought they were good enough, but a couple of months later, they discovered that some of their AA transactions were wrong. And so what had happened is that they'd only had a partial close for the AA transactions. Some of them were left in the open year, some of them had moved to history. Fortunately, they had a backup. We were able to go back to that and fix the error and then reclose the year. So even though the reopen was nice to have, there was still an error in their data that had to be fixed, and the backup was really the only way to do it. So Ashley will cover the options available to you when you close the GL, but I didn't want you to think that just having that ability to reopen a year was a replacement for a backup, because it doesn't protect you from error messages that might occur, because if you run through that reopen after you've had an error, you may or may not be where you need to be. If you can't make SQL backups, so in other words, if you don't have access to the tools to do that, which usually is going to require some sort of administrative privileges, whether that's the SA account or a Windows account that's privileged to use a tool like Management Studio. Make sure that your IT team is on standby and that they're ready to help. Emphasize to them how important this process is. Emphasize to them how important it is that they be available to make a backup when you need it. That's going to shorten the overall time that it takes. And it's impossible to tell them exactly when you're going to want it. We understand that, but hopefully you've got a good partner in your IT team and they can help you make these backups. Also, make sure that you've got enough storage capacity. You're going to take more backups, more manual backups than you're probably used to having on your server. If you've got really large company databases, this is especially important. You want to just work with your IT team and make sure that there's adequate space for multiple backups, because you're going to have a backup during each of the different modules that you close in addition to GL. It isn't just that final year-end close via GL. So it may be necessary to have your IT team temporarily give you more space for that. Again, you just have to be pretty assertive and say this is a critical process. If we don't have enough backup space, it's gonna have some consequences for us. And then lastly, too many backups is far preferable to too few. You're going to have the opportunity at the end of this process, after you've closed everything and you're comfortable with where you are, all your reports look good, you can delete all those backups. If they gave you space temporarily, they can take it back. another polling question.
Yeah, we are
I'll
on
let you go ahead
polling
and take
question
this one.
number 6. Yeah, I'll give you a break. Thank you for that information. So we are on polling question 6 of 14, and it is, what's the most important step to take before installing a Dynamics GP hotfix? So I know we've had some questions come in through the Q&A about the October update. We do have a link to Forvis Mazart Foresight's article about that linked here in the webinar as well, and that will be included in the archive email. So back to our polling question, please lock in a response, A through D. And I think what we're just seeing here, and I know we have a lot of clients on today, which is wonderful, but I think just kind of what you're seeing here with like the collaboration with IT for GP and adequate storage, a lot of that just speaks to that basic principle of an on-premises system like GP versus a cloud system like Business Central. So it's just a little bit different.
Yep.
All right.
Exactly right. And
yeah, results are in.
Okay. Yeah, I don't think we had a slide for this, but I am going to do some demo. So we'll let Jeremy cool off for a while longer. I'll take a little time and give you guys some demo. All right. So hopefully my screen will come up here. Okay.
I see your Microsoft notes.
Oh, you do?
Now I see your desktop.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I had a web browser open as well. Same screen. All right. So let's talk about what things are going to look like when you actually go through this process. So I kind of have my own way of doing this. You may have your own way of doing it. If you've not done it before and you're going to try it, you know, here's a kind of my template for how I would approach it. So I like to put all of my installers in a year-end update folder. If you're working on a system for the first time and it's been updated in the past, you may see a whole bunch of folders all over the place, you know, for different years. And you can safely delete those. There's really no value in hanging on to, you know, the 2016 version of GP at this point. But I like to have a working folder. And here I've got the update that was released earlier, as well as the most recent update. And these KB numbers you see embedded in the file names, those are a good indication of which is the newest one. We've also got the download page for the software. There are two different pages you're going to pay attention to. One is the full release. And if you've already got GP installed and you're just doing a hot fix somewhere, you're not going to need this. What you'll instead want is the service packs, hot fixes, and compliance updates. And that's what this looks like. And you'll see here just a link to download the patch file. Something that's super, super important about these downloads is they are protected behind the customer source login. So if you're going to try to download these and you don't have a customer source account, contact your partner. They'll have to help you get those. For those of you that are questioning the value of your Microsoft enhancement renewal that you pay every year, this is the most important thing that does for you at this point, is entitle you to get this download. So if you've stopped paying that or you've chosen not to pay it, just be aware that you're not, by the terms of your license, not entitled to get these updates anymore. All right, so once you've got that downloaded, you'll just run it. Unfortunately, they don't give you any sort of hey, I'm finished. You know, you can move on to the next step. It just sort of ends, and that's fine. Just, you know, you'll just have to watch it to make sure that that's done. I mentioned that if you're using a shared file location for your reports, that not having the GP executable closed can cause problems with the reports update. So I always just like to look at my shared folders and any open files. So you can see that, come on. Yeah, so once I start GP, you can see that on this share that where I've got my reports dictionary, that it still shows it is open. So if, you know, if I'd left this open and tried to do the update, I would get an error about my reports dictionary not being upgraded. So just make sure that everybody's out. And then the last thing I'm going to show you, and then we need to move on, is just a quick and dirty way. I don't want to say quick and dirty, but it's an easy way to do a backup in SQL if you need to get all of your databases backed up quickly. So let's call this GP year end. It's a maintenance plan, and you can of course go through and manually back up each individual database, but you can also use a maintenance plan. It's come up eventually. One other thing I'll mention since I'm in here and I just saw the management reporter database, if you're using management reporter and you're using the data mart, one thing that can help with processing the updates for the year-end update hotfix is to just stop your management reporter services. So just know that if you're trying to process a GP update, that the data mart's still trying to populate all those transactions, and it can really slow things down. Yeah, this is going to be slow. A lot going on here on my computer. All right, so there's just this backup database task, and you just sort of drag it over here to this palette. I'm going to cancel that. And then you can come in here and you can just say, I want to select the database, the GP databases that I have on here, and then you give it a destination. So maybe I want to back up those databases. I want to put it in this location is fine. If it's a manual backup, if you aren't, if you're relying on your regular nightly backups for recovery, you'll want to choose this copy only backup option. And then, yeah, we'll cancel that. And then you can just save this. And then once that's done, you'll have a maintenance plan over here. And you can just run that. And that's an easy way just to get all the databases at once. It really cuts down on the amount of time it takes to grab databases, database backups during this process. So, yep. So that's what I have on. That's just a real quick demo. I feel like we're running a little shorter on time than I thought. So I'll move on to Jeremy and inventory after I stop sharing my screen.
Thank you, Nathan.
Sure.
Good morning again to anybody who joined just a few minutes after the BC, if you skipped the BC. So I'm going to talk primarily about inventory this morning. And then I'm going to do a demo of a couple of things at the end of the slides. And then I'm going to take just like 60 seconds to talk about manufacturing. We don't have manufacturing as a part of the slide deck. And when we dive into manufacturing a little bit, I'll explain why. So just a couple of minutes on manufacturing for any manufacturing folks on the call. But year-end closing procedures, I have some screenshots here, but we'll actually go through this inside of a GP client. So on the year-end closing for inventory, we have a few options here. I'm going to start with at the bottom of the screen. We see that there's an update items standard cost. If you're using standard costing, there's a few different ways that we have to update your standard cost. One of those ways is during the year-end closing process, and that does the entire inventory module. So all of your items will be recosted based on their standard costs. So this is one place to do it. We'll talk about a couple of other places actually when we get to the demo. This other section is labeled remove. So as a part of the year-end closing process, we have the ability to remove some data from the system. What I will say is be very cautious about removing data, and I would make a point to discuss this with your partner as well as your audit partner. Removing data from the system, some people frown upon, but the options that we have are discontinued items, sold lot attributes, and then sold receipts and cost change history prior to some specified date. If you are going to remove sold receipts and cost change history, please, again, just discuss with somebody what that date should be. Leaving it blank will remove everything. So make sure if you're going to do remove, again, discuss that with somebody. This remove action as a part of the inventory year-end close cannot be reversed. So if you've done the right thing and done a backup, this would be the only recourse to kind of recover from this if we didn't mean to do it. So by default, when you open the inventory year-end closing window, those boxes are all unchecked. So not something that can accidentally happen. You would have to check the boxes and then hit remove. Again, those are all optional. And as far as the cost update standard, it doesn't matter if you're FIFO or LIFO. Either of those both fall within the periodic, which is the standard in GP. What does closing inventory year-end do? Well, one thing I want to mention here is closing the inventory subledger is completely optional, not required inside of GP. If you're using the inventory subledger, I try to encourage people to go through the year-end closing process just to kind of make an account of resetting some of these fields. So each item's beginning quantity to be the quantity on hand at each site at the time that this process is run. The quantity sold field, so on the item information card, the quantity sold would be reset to 0, and then the last year amounts and this year amounts are zeroed out. So, or it updates last year amounts based on what the values were for last year and zeros out this year amounts. So that's really the only thing that happens when we close the inventory if we're not doing any of those optional processes. As a part of the inventory year-end closing, this is also a really good time to do a physical inventory. If we're doing regular counts throughout the year, it may just be another incremental count. But if not, or if your organization chooses to do 100% physical, just remember once we start the count, it freezes your inventory. So once that count started, any items that are a part of that stock count, we're not going to be able to run transactions for. So make for sure that when we do this, that you are not going to be trying to run transactions at the same time. If we process this out and we do this the right way, it should have minimal impact on the facility, or even better if you can schedule some downtime to coincide with this. A couple of tips here. As a part of the inventory year-end closing process, once you hit that button to process the year-end close, there is no report. So you hit that button, it's going to run in the background. You can use Process Monitor to see when it completes. Generally, even for organizations with a large inventory, it's something that doesn't take a long time to run. It's pretty quick. So Process Monitor, and if we don't remember where that is, I'll show you that here on the demo. The current cost is the amount you most recently paid for the item. And then if you update the item's standard cost, any items that are assigned the periodic, so FIFO or LIFO, the valuation method will be adjusted automatically to reflect each item's current cost. So as far as the year-end closing procedures go, just some general recommendations. Post all your transactions for the year that are going to affect the inventory quantities. So anything that you have sitting out there, go ahead and post all those transactions. This is also a good time to do data maintenance. So we also want to reconcile our inventory quantities. When we do reconcile, SOP, POP, and then inventory last. The SOP, so sales order processing, purchase order processing, what happens in those subledger modules affects the inventory. So we want to make sure that we process those two prior to reconciling your inventory. Again, complete your physical inventory count, post any adjustments, and then any reporting that you do have, whether it be the historical inventory trial balance or just a regular inventory trial balance, whatever those reports are that you rely on each month or each year or each quarter, make sure we go ahead and print those reports. Again, if you haven't already done so, back up your database, and then you can go through the fiscal period close for the inventory. We'll talk about the fiscal calendar during the demo. So when I say close the year, that doesn't mean running the GL close process. I meant going into the fiscal calendar and closing out the inventory modules, or the inventory periods. And then lastly, running that process. A good idea, if you are going to run the close and you include a standard cost row or any of those additional pieces, is doing that database backup prior to and after. If we need to go back in time for one of those other subledger modules, having that before and after keeps us from having to redo processes. And I'm going to jump into the demo. Real quick here. All right, so hopefully everybody can see my screen. I'm logged into GP. All right, perfect. And I'm on the home screen right now. So a couple of things I want to run through before we get to inventory is at the system level. So I'm going to go to Tools, Setup, Company, Fiscal Periods. And we're going to go ahead and look at the calendar here. Just for note, as we look at some data and we poke around in here today, I am at a demo environment, so my date is set to 4/12/2027. That is just the default when we log into the Fabricam or the TWO company. So just for point of reference, that's why we have these 2027 dates. So again, here, if you haven't already done so, we can see that like we have some open years. We haven't closed in this environment some of these previous years. Most of the data that I'm working with is 2027, and I also have 2028 open. So when I was talking about the year-end close in inventory and closing the year, this is what I was talking about. Simply coming in here for inventory and checking these boxes on each of these periods. So after we have all of our open transactions posted and everything's done for the year, it's just making sure those are closed out. If your organization has some formal process, by all means, please follow that. But always a good idea when we think we're done with everything in the subledger and the inventory subledger, checking those boxes will ensure that nothing changes from that point forward. If we do, then we can always come back and uncheck one of those boxes if we need to do something. So the other thing we didn't talk about at the beginning of all this is creating our new fiscal year calendar. I already have one here for 2028. The fiscal calendar matches up to our calendar year, but I'm going to go ahead and create 2029 here just to give you guys an example. I just go to the year and type 2029. I want 12 periods. It's automatically going to default in my start date and my end date. If you're running 13 periods or you're doing some other methodology, maybe you start July the 1st or June the 1st, or you have a different fiscal calendar, October and governmental, you can change the dates to whatever they need to be. GP will automatically pick up the dates. So it picked up 1/1/2029 because the last calendar that I had set up ended on 12/31/2028. Once we get the dates in there, the number of periods and the year is correct, it's important to verify that information. Then we'll hit calculate. And it goes ahead and creates our next fiscal calendar for us. So as you're getting ready, if you haven't already done so, we're kind of near the end of 2024, you probably want to create your 2025 calendar. Once that's done, we're just going to hit OK. And that's really all it takes to create the fiscal calendar. A lot of organizations have security to prevent everybody from getting in there. If you feel like you need to be in there and you're not able to, make sure to check with your finance department. If nobody sort of has an idea why or how, reach out to your partner for help. I'm going to jump into inventory next. So inside the inventory module, the year-end close is under routines, and it's really just here, year-end close. So just like we saw on that other screen, discontinued items, sold lot attributes, receipt change history, item standard cost. If you are standard costed and you do not use manufacturing, you would update your standard cost either, again, through the year-end close by checking this box, or through the standard cost role inside of the inventory subledger. If you use manufacturing, any cost rule changes you're going to make will be done inside the inventory or inside the manufacturing module. So for this, I'm just going to leave these boxes unchecked, and I'm going to go ahead and hit process. It's going to run through. Again, this is a demo company. There's not a lot there. And you can see it showed us the percentages. And once those boxes disappear, the inventory year-end close is done. I'd mentioned Process Monitor before. If we go to the Dynamics GP dropdown, we scroll down, we'll see Process Monitor. If we open that up before we do the close year, you would see some entries pop here into this screen. Because it is pretty fast and we do see that percentage 10, 20, 30, we can watch it kind of on its way through. As long as you're sitting there, that would be a good way to monitor it. If you kick it off and you see some activity in Process Monitor and you're going to walk away, Process Monitor may be your best option to know when it's completed. You would have no tasks left in the Process Monitor once it's done. All right. I want to jump real quick and talk just for a couple of minutes about manufacturing and cost rule and things there. Because we don't have slides dedicated to it, manufacturing inventory generally go hand in hand. So inside of our manufacturing module, you can see here in routines, roll up and revalue. So there is a screen here. This is the exact same window. If you don't use manufacturing and use standard cost, you should be familiar with this screen. It looks exactly the same on the inventory side. Two separate processes, roll up and revalue. If you roll up your inventory, it's going to go through and based on all of your standard costs and all your proposed costs, and it's going to create your report of what your new standard costs would look like. It is important that when you run this process that you go and verify that data prior to revaluing your inventory. So you want to make sure to do your roll up, review the report, and then revalue. This process and on the inventory side without manufacturing does the entire inventory as well as a part of that inventory year-end close. So the entire inventory is done. If you need to do individually, and a lot of organizations do, we don't want to change our standard costs this year, but we have these 50 items that are going to see a big influx. Under cards, we have inventory and standard cost changes. This would be how we do it one item at a time. So if I go to an item, I would be able to roll up here. If there were any changes, so we can see here based on information inside of the system, currently this finished good is costed at $55.50. Because we have some material changes, we have some labor and overhead changes, we have some machine cost changes, it's going to give us a new standard cost for the new year of $159.73. This doesn't take effect until we hit replace costs. Once we do that, it goes ahead and it rolls that change for us. So we can see here now on this phone, our new standard cost is $159.73. So again, this process very specific to manufacturing, but at a very high level, whether we're doing it on the inventory side as a whole, this is exactly the process that's happening. We get a roll-up, which is creating a new proposed standard, and then a revaluation, which is replacing that cost. When you revalue, it is important to work with your finance team if you're going to do that, because it will affect the general ledger. You must include your finance team. Anytime you do a standard cost rule, they're going to want to review that report, and they're going to want to know what variances are going to hit and how it's going to affect their inventory valuation. If it is a extremely large increase or decrease, it is possible that they may want to make some adjustments and kind of reclass some of that to different accounts. So before doing that, make sure you coordinate with your finance team. Other than that, there is no process on the manufacturing side, just some standard best practices. Make sure to close out any open MOs. Review your MRP data for any low-hanging fruit. And what I mean by that is MOs that are out there open where we're seeing very minimal, or even purchase orders, very minimal requirements. So like a fraction of an each, or on a PO where we order 10,000, there's an expected receipt of 20 units. Most likely those just need to be canceled off and that PO closed out. So MRP, if you're using manufacturing, is going to be an easy way to see that. If you're not using MRP, then SmartList inside of GP is a good way to check for any of that data as well. And then, of course, data maintenance. So your reconciliations, your checklinks, things like that. All right. Back to inventory. I just had a couple of things I wanted to cover here. We already talked about closing the subledger. So really the only other thing I wanted to talk about was the stock count. If you haven't done this, or you don't do it on a regular basis, maybe it's a once a year thing, this may be a good refresher. So everything's going to be in transactions under the inventory subledger. So here, what we're going to do is we're going to look at the stock count schedule. So we've got to create the stock count before we can actually execute it. So here on this one, I just called this one demo. This is one we're going to reuse, or we can reuse. So this has been run a couple of times. And you're going to add items. You can add items one at a time by going to the line, looking up, and selecting an item to put in there. Or you can mass add. Mass add has a few different ways to add it based on next stock count date, site, ABC code, item class number, things like that. Most organizations do this site, and then a lot of people use item class is something we see pretty common. to create these. And really all this does, again, is just add the items. So once you insert the criteria, what it's going to do is then it'll add the items into the stock count. I'm going to leave this just at 2 items to keep it simple, but this is part of the stock count. So once we do this, and we talked about before, once we start this count, it freezes our inventory, right? So I'm going to go ahead and hit start count. And then what it's going to ask me for is this exception reports. And then it's also going to ask me for my stock count sheets. If you're printing sheets out of GP, this is where this comes into play. Sorted by is going to be important. We have a few options here. So if you have a single site or you have multiple sites, this is going to depend. I'm going to do by item number, and I'm going to do a page break between items. I'm going to do the screen, no exceptions, and then my count sheets will come up next. On the count sheets, I did not include current inventory. You can do however you want. Some people will have 2 pages here, 1 for each item. Some people choose to print and give these to people, or these can be done a variety of different ways, Excel spreadsheets, things like that. So once it's started, we go into stock count entry. We're going to pull up that stock count because I already have it open. And then we would enter here. So how many is counted? We would check the box for verified once we're sure. And then any variances will be calculated at that point. Once you're done, review with finance again, because it's going to create some ledger activity, and then we would hit process. So once you process and post your stock count, it goes ahead and reopens your inventory back for everybody else. Couple of links here for you guys, the inventory user guide, and then anything GP year-end related. You're going to find a lot of information in the year-end blog. A lot of content out there posted by Microsoft directly, so a lot of good information.
All right,
And
Jeremy,
Sarah,
if you want to stop your screen share, yes.
Yep, sorry.
We will go to polling question 8, and that is, do you close receivables or payables during year-end? Trick question, easy question, you pick. So A, payables and receivables only. B, both payables and receivables. C, I'm not sure. D, here for professional education. So please take a moment to lock in your response. And regarding the links that Jeremy was talking about, those are available in the PDF download that's available here in the webinar platform and also on our website. And I know we've got a lot to cover. We may need to pick up the pace because, surprisingly, in our 3.5-hour webinar, we are down to the last hour and 15 minutes. All right, results are in, and both payables and receivables has the highest percentage. Back to you.
All right, let's dig into receivables, and we'll find another gear here to get through this. All right, receivables management. Be prepared to make several backups. We've talked about backups before. Post all sales and receivables transactions for the year. The main thing we're trying to do when we close receivables is just make sure that any transactions from the sales module that affect our GL, we just want to make sure those get posted before we move on to closing the GL. And you're going to close the year. Optionally, you can close fiscal periods. Jeremy showed that when he talked about inventory, how you can close periods for specific modules on the fiscal calendar. Close the tax year and then make a final backup for this step. Sales and receivables closing maintains accurate summary information for functions that aren't date sensitive. So there are some summary screens for sales that are updated throughout the year, but there's not a reconcile process that you can run to just update those at will. They're really just calculated as you use the system. And once you go through the receivables close process, those amounts are going to be moved over to the last year fields, and you don't really have an opportunity to easily fix those. You can manually update those fields, but just be aware that there's not an easy automated way to do it. And so what we're talking about are the amounts since last close, customer finance charge summary. SmartList objects, those are just a bunch of columns that you can add to SmartList to show those summary values from the current and prior year. You want to separate your transactions for future periods into a batch that can be posted later. So if you've got some stuff that doesn't have to post until after the year or into the next year, just separate those into a different batch. So you can just close all of the current year or post all the current year stuff and get that closed. This would be a good time for a backup. So once you're ready to actually go through the year-end close routine, just grab a backup beforehand. Before you ever push a button that says close, you're going to want to grab a backup. And then you're going to select both the fiscal and calendar year options when you do that close, and then there'll be a report that prints out for that. And I'll show you real quickly what those fields are that GP doesn't consider date sensitive. So even though the overall sales module is, it's just that these fields are not. So grab that real quick for you. And yep, there's my screen. So this is what they're referring to here, is if you come into the customer summary inquiry window, it's just these amounts. And when we do a close, it's going to move these values over to here. You can manually edit these though. I don't know how many people are using these, but this is what they're referring to. It's just how these fields get updated. And then go back to our slides. You can just see a full list here of the different fields that get cleared and then which ones get updated. And you will see a lot of these in SmartList as well as columns. There's a few out of the box SmartList. There's one that's called Average Days to Pay that has some of these. And so you could just go through and modify that and add these just to verify that they look the way you want. The optional step of closing the fiscal periods, again, that's just through the calendar. If you said, okay, once we've posted all of our sales transactions in preparation for close, we want to make sure nobody posts any additional sales transactions. So you would just close all of the periods for the sales module. This is what the window looks like to actually do the tax year close. One thing that's important about this though is that you only want to do this after sales and purchasing are both closed. But this will report on all of your taxable sales. So any transactions you had that were marked as taxable, this will show you a breakdown of all of those for the year. Another great time for a backup. And here are the links for the documentation, and this will show you all the steps for actually going through that close process. But not a lot on receivables. It is just mostly updating those year to date, life to date, prior year type balances, and then reporting on the taxable amounts. I would say that the most important thing that you're doing here is just making sure that any sales transactions that you want to be accounted for in your GL are actually being posted. And with that, we are ready for Ashley and payables.
All right, so we'll run through the closing of payables and 1099s. We'll try to do this relatively quickly. Okay, so 1099s and 1096, no form changes this year. Same as last year, you can print all of your 1099 forms, NEC, miscellaneous, all those right out of GP. It does the lines for you. There is no need to buy forms. And really super important, 1099s have to be filed electronically. GP does not have the capability of doing this, so you will need a third-party product to help you file these 1099s electronically. Towards the end of this section, we do mention a couple that we recommend: Green Shades, W2Mate. There's a couple out there. Reach out to your partner if you don't have one already set up. Make sure you have a vendor lined up to help you with process or actually filing the 1099s. All right. Jumping right in. So very similar to receivables, payables, when you close the year, it's going to update the year-end, calendar year-end amounts for 1099s year to date and last year amounts. And it rolls those balances forward in those inquiry views, smart list reports, things like that. Again, to reiterate, backups are required. You want to make sure you have a backup before you start this process and when you're done. So lots of backups when you're closing out the year in GP. This is a checklist. Again, I think it's been said that you want to probably print out this presentation or use the links that we provide. All of these modules have checklists that kind of go through the order of operations of what you want to do and how you want to perform the year-end close. So we'll just kind of run through this pretty quickly. So after your backup, you want to make sure all of your payables transactions for the current year are posted. It's recommended that you print an aged trial balance report for the entire year. Keep it as save it as a PDF, keep it for your records. It's also recommended that you print out the vendor period analysis report. This is just for your, data integrity. Make sure you have that somewhere if you ever need to go back and reconcile anything. If you're going to do the year-end update, now is probably a good time to do that before we actually close the modules. Once all those pre-checks are done, your backup's done, your transactions are posted, you have all your reports, you've finished any period end routines that you guys do. If you guys do something monthly, quarterly, do all that stuff first, have your backups done, go ahead and do your 1099 reconciliations. You want to make sure that the 1099s that you're going to print are correct and ready to go. All right, so slide. There you go. 1099 information is correct. If you need to edit it, edit as required. Once your numbers for 1099 data is correct, you can proceed with printing your 1099 statements. Once you've finished all of that, get ready to close the module, go ahead and get a backup. So backup before you start the process, backup after you're done with your 1099 reconciliation and printing your statements, and right before you click that year-end close routine, you want to make sure you have that backup. So you go through, you click the routine, it's in the utilities, you run the process and close the year. After that's done, you want to go into your fiscal periods, close the fiscal periods. It's all straightforward. It's all pretty much the same 3 modules. Then you can, as Nathan just went through, you can close your tax year if you want. So just to recap, closing the payables module is going to update the summary information for the functions that are not date sensitive, such as your amount since last closed inquiry, your vendor summary inquiry windows that say since last closed, in those areas there. All right, let me go to the next slide. So this kind of goes through what it does, your checklist. Here's your same thing. It is receivables. It's your cleared amounts, what it does, updates, what it's updating. Again, highly recommend that you guys print out these PowerPoints or save them somewhere. Jeremy also covered this. This is your fiscal periods window where you're going to check off your payables module, purchasing module. You can close specific modules. You don't have to close everything. If you just want to close financial, you can just check off those. If you just want to close purchasing, you can just check off those. That prevents people from posting to those specific areas that are checked. Here's the guideline for actually processing the routine, the year-end close routine. So routines, company, I'm sorry, this is for the taxes. This is the tax year end close. So follow that, and then back up, back up, back up. Super important. And this just kind of goes through the overview that we just did in detail. So again, highly recommend grabbing a copy of this presentation, and it kind of runs through, you know, table references and things like that. Go through here, and here's your links, some recommended products that you can use to file your 1099s. To reiterate, biggest issue I see when it comes down to year-end close and payables and printing 1099s is not having a third-party product lined up to help you with your filing of your 1099 forms. Please make sure if you haven't started looking, you have that figured out now, where it's on your list to do. It needs to be top priority. And here is the payables user guide for Microsoft and some year-end documentation.
And Ashley, one thing I'll mention on the third party for the electronic tax filing is there are a lot of accounting firms and CPA firms that can provide that service as well. So if you're a little bit behind, talk to whoever files your taxes and see if they're able to help you with that as well.
Absolutely.
Polling question.
Yes, we are unfortunately going to skip through the fixed assets and GP section. We're on that polling question, but for the sake of time, we've got 70 slides and polling questions to move through. So please lock in your response. Also regarding the fixed assets section, please feel free to download this presentation, and Nathan and Ashley are always available to help answer questions as well. So we'll give it a minute on this polling question, and then we will hop into the general ledger. And Nathan, when you're ready, if you've got demos and all that too, we can breeze through the slides and hop into the demo. Here we go.
Yeah, so Ashley will be covering the general ledger, and I think we've got about 30 minutes to get through payroll, or general ledger and payroll, and I want to make sure we take adequate time on the GL closing, because this is really the most important part. So Ashley, as you go through this, if if there's anything we need to demonstrate, let me know and I can bring that up. But just want to make sure we don't leave any unanswered questions, or that we
Sure.
we skip over too much on the GL part here.
Yeah. Okay. So, closing the GL. It's pretty straightforward. I think it's the one area that everybody that uses GP for the most part, I could fairly say does do. Nothing has changed this year. It's all pretty straightforward and the same as previous years. But so there is the effects of closing the year. What does it do? So closing the GL year moves all of your current transactions, so all of your data for the current year, 2024. When you process the routine, it pushes all that data to history. And it also, so that's what does that mean? So it summarizes your GL balances, it closes out your P&L accounts to retained earnings and zeroes those out, for the new year. It rolls your balance sheet accounts forward to the new year. So basically it creates a journal entry that processes all that data. Once the actual process of the utility of running the GL year-end close is done, you get a nice little journal entry that tells you everything that it did. And then if you use an analytical accounting, it does update the balances in the AA tables. So we'll kind of run through this in a little bit more detail. So I'm going to touch on analytical accounting a little bit for those of you that use it. Super important. You have to make sure the AA balances are correct before you close the year. This will create a nightmare for you if you do not do that. So I'm going to repeat that. You have to make sure the AA balances are correct before you close the year. Take the extra time, verify that information. There is not really a specific routine for closing the AA year. It's just part of the GL year-end close routine. So when you run that routine, you're closing AA as well. And lastly, with AA, you want to make sure the AA settings are accurate and correct before you close that year. Again, biggest issue we see with year-end close in relation to AA is not verifying your balances and something changing in your settings for AA. So please make sure you're double checking that information. All right. So a couple prerequisites to check before you actually process the year-end close is you want to make sure that the server has enough disk space. You want to have your database admins make sure that there's enough free space on the server that would equal the GL 20,000 table in the SQL Server. So SQL Management Studio GL 20,000 table is your open transactions. We're actually going to take that and we're going to move that to a different table, which is your history table. So you want to make sure that your database admin has verified that there's at least that much space on the server before you start this process. You're also going to have to make backups. So make sure there's room for that. Okay. So before you close your GL, this is the very last thing that you're going to do. You want to make sure all your other modules are closed. Once your other modules are closed, by modules I mean payables, receivables, all that. You want to make your final posting adjustments for the 2024 year. Probably more important than anything is to verify that your GL accounts are classified correctly. So your balance sheet accounts are set up as balance sheets. Your P&L accounts are set up as P&L accounts. Probably 95% of the time that we have to reverse out a year is because there's a P&L account that's classified as a balance sheet and it did not roll forward correctly. There should be a smart list that was created for you at whatever point that tells you to look at your accounts, and it should identify really quickly balance sheet groupings and P&L groupings, and so you should be able to identify those. If you don't have that, reach out to your partner, have them make you one. You want to have a smart list or another way to verify that your accounts are classified correctly. Super, super important. You've done that, and then definitely want to make sure that you have your reporting. You want to do a detailed trial balance. You can save it as a PDF, but you want to have one for the entire year. You can do a summary as well, but definitely want to have a detailed trial balance that lists all of your account detail for the year. It helps with any kind of data integrity issues that you might come across if you have that before you close. And then in your setup, so there's two things that I always require that we check before we close the year if you do it with me. We're going to go into your GL setup and we're going to make sure that your retained earnings account is correct. I don't know how many times I see where somebody goes in to close the year, they don't check this, and for whatever reason, their retained earnings account has changed. Go to setup, GL setup, make sure your retained earnings account is the correct account. If you're closing a divisional retained earnings, make sure those account segments are correct as well. And the other thing you want to check here is that you're maintaining history. Make sure that maintain history option is checked before you run the GL close process. And if you have a backup and you forget this step, then you have a backup and it doesn't matter. Make sure you have backups, but double check all these things. All right. And then print your financial reports, whether that's out of GP, whether that's MR or another tool. And you also want to make sure your new fiscal year is created before you actually run the routine. Most likely this has already been done, but just double check it. It's good practice. And then once all these other criteria have done, you've gone through your checklist, then you can go in and do the actual closing routine. Make sure you have backups before you hit the close year, and you want to have a backup after you hit the close year. If your IT folks don't want that many backups, you can always tell them that you'll get rid of them later, but make sure you have backups before and after, and you want to maintain those backups until the accounting folks have had a chance to thoroughly verify that everything is correct. A check that I typically do after we close the year and we get our journal entry, so you'll close the year, your process bar will say complete, you'll get a journal entry, printout report. I like to go into the inquiry summary and go spot check balance sheet accounts and some P&L accounts. And the balance sheets, I'm making sure that they have a balance brought forward for the new year for 2025. And the P&L accounts, I want to make sure that those are zeros for the new year. Okay, so it's an easy way to check to make sure that that is all correct. All right, so print your financial report, set up your fiscal year, close the year, back up your database. And again, just to reiterate, SmartList is a great place to verify your posting types and make sure that they're correct. Make sure all your balance sheets were set up as balance sheets and P&Ls were set up as P&Ls. And yeah, just a reminder that balance sheets roll forward, P&Ls will zero out because they've rolled up to retained earnings. So it's pretty important that you are reconciling your retained earnings accounts probably before you close your year, and make sure you know what the balance is, so you also know at the end of the process what your retained earnings balance should be. And there's a guide and year-end blog link if you need it. And I guess we're
and we are on, yep, our next question. So when do you usually close your general ledger? Jan 1, within a month, between 1 and 3 months, or hanging with us for that CPE?
And while folks
And
are
Nathan, will
answering,
you be covering payroll, or is Ashley covering payroll next?
well, yeah, Ashley's going to take care of payroll.
Yeah, I just want
Excellent.
to just reiterate one thing on the GL real quick, if I can.
Yeah.
So it used to be a massive disaster if something was found after the year end, the GL year end close was discovered. There is a reverse year if needed. It reverses out the entry, and you can reverse and reclose. So if you close your year and you come across, oh wait, all these balance sheet accounts were classified incorrectly and we've processed for 3 months, and what are we going to do? Don't panic. Reach out to your partner. We can there is a reverse year process that is pretty painless, but if you can avoid it, obviously you want to avoid it, right?
Yes.
So I just wanted to touch on that.
Thank you.
I've got just a couple of quick questions I was going to throw at you, Ashley, if you want to, if I can test your troubleshooting knowledge real quick on Jill.
Save those? I'm so sorry,
Yeah.
Nathan. We need to press on. Can we save those for the end?
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, so we are going to jump right into payroll. Similar to payables, there are no form changes this year, which is always good news. All right. So checking your data is the very first step in closing the payroll year. It is highly recommended that you close the payroll module after you've ran your last payroll for 2024 or whatever your year, but for 2024, and prior to running the first payroll of the new year. So your last payroll of 2024 and before you run the first payroll of 2025 is that's the window that you want to perform the close and run your W-2s and update your tax tables. You want to do all that stuff in between that time period. But the first step is double checking your data. So we'll run through these. All right. Review the deduction and benefit setup windows and verify that your W-2 boxes and labels are correct. If you need to make changes, you can do so, but make sure you roll those down to all employees. Otherwise, it won't take effect. All right. You want to make sure that the subject to tax boxes options are correct for your pay codes. So go run through all of your pay codes and make sure that, whatever the situation needs to be, this window is correct. You got to double check that. And then if you guys are utilizing retirement plans within GP, make sure to verify in the employee tax maintenance that the W-2 option is checked for those employees that are enrolled. And then if there are any COVID-related pay codes or pay scenarios that are similar that require the W-2 check boxes, make sure this is set up in the pay codes. If you make changes in here, you also need to make sure that you roll down to all employees. All right. So again, there's no reporting changes this year to the W-2s, W-3, W-4s, or 1095s. Everything is the same as last year. And we are at a polling question.
Yes, thank you. And that is, will you move to a payroll service in your next ERP? So as it's been mentioned a few times, In this Business Central GP webinar, GP has a payroll module. Business Central does not. So you're going to have to, figure out a plan for that. Are there any other highlights you want to capture here while people lock in their response, Ashley?
I think we'll go through it in just
Excellent.
a sec. I don't want to jump ahead. I'll save it.
All right. I like it.
Yeah, payroll's a beast.
Yeah, and to our audience, again, if you have GP-specific questions, please let us know.
Sure.
Whether you email Nathan and Ashley, whether you put it in the Q&A here, we're here to help answer those questions at this critical time of year.
Absolutely.
But we somehow are running short on time in this big webinar. All right, results are in.
Okay. All right. So the close process, again, make sure you have a backup prior to starting. Because there are no form changes this year, the year-end update is not required. It's recommended, but it is not required. If you still plan on having that installed, it will need to be done before you start the year-end close process, though. When you're ready to close and after you have made that initial backup, make sure, again, all of your 2024 pay runs are complete. You do not want to close until all the pay runs for the current year are finished. If you have monthly or quarterly procedures that you perform, probably now is a good time to do that. You want to do that before you go through the process of closing. So again, back up your company database and the Dynamics database for payroll. You want to definitely have those backups before you start the process. And then it's also, it'll be recommended that we'll do a backup after the actual close is finished. So now, first step, you're now ready to verify your W-2 data and 1099 statements. Let's go through here. So once you've verified your W-2 and 1099 data for accuracy, you're now ready to go ahead and process those forms. So you can print your W-2s and then your W-3 transmittal form. If you have 1099-Rs or 1099-6 forms, you can go ahead and print that now. And you can actually file your taxes and submit your ACA forms, however you typically do that. Now's a good time to make sure your fiscal periods for 2025 are set up. I would imagine if you're doing anything else, payables, whatever, you've already done this, but now's a good time to verify. All right, so you want to go into the fiscal year periods, and you definitely want to uncheck or check off all the months for payroll for sure before you do this next step. So once you've done that, you are now ready to install the payroll tax update, which this is the tax tables for the new year. You go to GP maintenance payroll tax updates, and it's a check for tax. It's an automatic check. You will need to be logged in as the admin in GP to do this. You should only have access if you're logged in as SA, and you will need your authorization number, which is typically the main phone number, including area code, that was used when your Microsoft account for GP was created. If you don't have that information or you don't remember what it is, your partner should be able to get it, or it should be listed in your account under customer source. All right. Once you've finished installing the tax update and all that, you want to go in and verify that the last year end update is in fact the date you processed. So verify this date is the date you're running this, and just make sure that's correct. All right. If you are a Mag Media filer or you file electronically, which if you do, you know, then confirm your registration with the Social Security Administration. Complete all your pay runs for 2024, create the year-end wage file, verify W-2 amounts, and confirm that no one updates any W-2 data while you're electronically filing this. Super important. If you're electronically filing, probably not a bad idea to make everybody get out of GP while you're doing this process. And yes, this should be 2024. Right here it says complete all pay runs. All right. All right. These are the tables this is for your database admins. These are the tables that are used for creating the W-2s, and then these are the tables that are used for storing W-2 information, just if you need it for whatever reason. and printing your W-2s. GP will print the W-2 forms with lines on blank paper. And since most payroll admins do file electronically, there is no need to actually have to purchase the pre-printed forms. GP will do that for you. There is no red line though when you print, but because it's electronically filed, it doesn't matter. All right. And then ACA forms. The deadline for filing the 1099-5C is March 31st, 2025. GP does not produce an electronic file. You can add dependents via the Edit W-2 window if needed. And we can also, there is a way to upload the data directly to your year-end tables. We do this for a lot of our clients instead of tracking it. If you're interested in a template for uploading your ACA data, reach out to us, let us know. We can definitely help you with that. You can also use the HR Health Benefit Enrollment window to add data for employees. And just note that the 1094B and 1095B are 1094B and 1095B are not supported. All right. This is a sample of the ACA form. Again, if you are interested in upload for this data, let us know. We do have some templates that we can happy to share with you to make this a little bit easier process. And these are 3 recommendations. There's other out there for sure, but these are 3 that we recommend for electronically filing your W-2s. eSmart Payroll is a good one, W-2 Mate's a good one, and Atrix. And make note of this one as well if you're a payroll user. The Payroll User Guide is probably one of the better ones. It has a pretty thorough checklist and walks through all the different requirements for closing the payroll year and printing your W-2s and updating your tax tables. And then the Payroll Year-End blog, they do a pretty good job about, just making notes of any changes, any tax table changes that might come out. So if, for example, I don't know, Kansas, they roll out a change to Kansas in April, right? It'll be noted in these blogs. So kind of, if you're payroll, follow this Payroll Year-End blog throughout the year, because there's definitely some key things that you need to know about.
Excellent. Gotta love checklists.
I did that as quick as I could.
You did. That was awesome, Ashley. So Nathan, while people lock in this question, so we are on a polling question, and it is about, hey, would you like to connect with us for specific information about year-end processes in GP? So if you would like more information about GP and your year-end close, please select A and we will reach out. Nathan, if you are here, do you want to ask those questions that you had?
Sure.
Excellent.
Yeah, and these are just some. These are actually listed in the FAQ sections of those articles that we're sharing, but they're there for a reason. They're fairly common, so thought maybe we could throw these out. Some things that people run into. Just take a couple minutes. So, Ashley, first question: do I have to close the fiscal year before the first day of my next fiscal year? No,
you don't. I have clients that do it in July, and it's really, you want to do it after you're done posting your entries, and after you're done posting the entries for the year and you've reconciled everything and you have all your reports. So don't rush it. If you don't have to, you can close it at any time.
Yeah, and so GP doesn't prevent you from entering new transactions, or doesn't affect anything. Yeah, we've probably got people that haven't closed their years for a while. Okay.
Yeah, as long as your fiscal periods are open, you're good. Yeah.
All right. Can I make adjusting entries after I close the year?
You can. You can make adjusting entries 1 historical year back. And what I mean by that is, if you are still in 2024 and you have closed 2023, you cannot post to 2022, but you can post to 2023. So 1 historical year backwards, you can make entries. You just have to open up that fiscal period, and it is highly recommended that you only do that in December, or whatever the last day of your fiscal calendar is. What will happen if you post to a historical year is you'll see a double line entry. You'll see the line items that you're making the entry, and then you'll see the retained earnings roll up. when you do it that way.
All right. What about a couple error messages here? One of them would be an error message that says batches cannot be posted while the year-end close is in process whenever you try to post a batch to GL.
Yeah, that just means that you have batches that exist in either a subledger, payables, receivables, or in the general ledger. A lot of times it's the new year. So if I was trying to close 2024, most likely I've got transaction batches for 2025, and the GL routine recognizes that. So you just want to verify if you get that message. Just make sure that the batches that you currently have out there are for the new year and not the year you're trying to close. If they're for the year you're trying to close, post those before you process the close.
Do recurring batches affect that message?
No. Yeah, they do not. No.
Okay. What if somebody sees an error that says, sorry, another user is closing the year, but we know that nobody is trying to close the year?
I probably need to clear activity. Kick everybody out.
Yeah, and I think there's another table we can look at as well. Yeah. But yeah, it's going to probably require some SQL work. And that's another point I'll make real quickly is that, with troubleshooting some of these error messages, it may take some SQL expertise and actually running a SQL statement to fix a problem. And that's, something that a consultant can help you with as well. And Ashley says I can't ask any more questions. So
that's all you get.
Does anybody in our audience have any burning questions they want to bounce off of this?
Yes, this is the time. Send any of those GP questions in now, as we are caught up on time and polling questions. Hooray! So please enter those questions now. I think some of the ones that Nathan just talked about now are crucial. A lot of those common things that he and Ashley have seen throughout their careers. And then as we're rounding out the year-end processing in GP, we're going to bring back Jeremy and Jason to talk about ERP assessments, right? So probably going to be a buzzword for GP clients in the next coming years. Right. So just know that we're here to support our clients through these transitions. Dynamics GP is a phenomenal product. It's going to be with us for years ahead still, and then now's the time to plan, because as one of our practice leaders said, nobody gets excited about moving mass amounts of data. So we're here to help support that transition and everything else. So I'm going to check the Q&A. GP clients, please send in any specific questions. And then just another reminder, all of these links that they've called attention to are available in the learning materials download here on the webinar platform. So with that, Nathan, Ashley, any other final comments?
Well, I was going to mention one quick thing about receivables that may be kind of important for some folks. If you print statements, just be aware that there's a section in that article that talks about how you have to create a modified statement for December and January. GP has a little bit of an issue putting balances on if you've already run your receivables close and then you try to print a statement for for December, January. It does use those summary tables to pull some of that. So there's some good step-by-step instructions on how to create a modified version of your statement to make sure those balances show. And I think Ashley had something as well. Go ahead, Ashley.
Yeah, I was just going to touch on unit accounts. If you're using unit accounts in the GL, there is an option in the card that lets you check off clear balances. And what that does is at the year-end close routine, it zeroes out those balances for the next year. If you forget it, we can run a script to clear those out if needed. But yeah, if you're using unit accounts, 99% of the people do clear those out every year. So just go in your card of the unit account and make sure that that option is checked, and it'll do it for you. You don't have to call us. That's it.
Excellent. Thank you so much. All right. So for our audience members with us today, we are wrapping up the Dynamics GP year-end processing information. If you haven't captured it already, Nathan and Ashley's contact information is shown here. So I'll give a little 10 seconds here, and then I'm going to flip over to the last section of our webinar today, and it's going to be talking about those technology assessments and what Forvis Mazars specifically has to offer, and how we can be a supportive technology partner. So with that, we are wrapping up our Navigating Year-End Processing in Business Central and GP webinar. And we're going to have Jason Lane join us and bring back Jeremy Atkins-Hill. And so with that, here is our near final little attendance check. All right, and off to you, Jason. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah, and thanks to everybody who's been chatting for the last couple hours. It's been good stuff. I've been listening in, of course, and really appreciate just a few minutes here to kind of talk about, we recognize, and Microsoft recognizes, that there's a potential for a pretty heavy lift, going forward for some of you to migrate off of GP. And so one of the things that they're offering is a free assessment. It is a Microsoft-funded assessment through a select few partners such as Forvis Mazars, where we can, have a phone call with you, spend a little bit of time understanding, your current situation, your current setup with GP, some of the priorities that will be a part of your migration, and really start to lay the groundwork for what we like to say is a roadmap going forward. This could lead to a more in-depth assessment, a paid engagement, if you will. This could lead to an RFP. This could lead to, some really good answers on Business Central potentially being a good fit for you. A variety of different ways that you can look at the assessment process. So with that said, we want to jump in and just share a little bit more about the free assessment. And I'm sorry, that's right. We hit a couple slides. Just want to make sure I knew where we were. With the free assessment, we can start those now. So if you reach out to us, or if we connect with you post the webinar here, we generally like to have just a quick call with you, maybe 15 minutes, 30 minutes, to kind of understand your timeline, who might be a part of that initial call, when we can schedule that. And then we have some processes internally, and we can get that rolling on the internal side. Once everything's approved, then we'll set up those initial calls with you to help engage in that assessment. Now, we'd be remiss if we didn't mention that we've done a variety of different paid engagements from an assessment perspective for many years. We do system assessments, business process assessments, technology assessments. We've done assessments setting up RFPs. So just know that the free assessment is a great first step. It's not the only step that we offer, but it's certainly an opportunity for you to, again, start to lay the groundwork for that roadmap. Jeremy, anything you'd like to add?
Hey, Jason. Here? Yeah, can we talk just a minute about the free versus the paid assessments? Because on you and I did a webinar a few weeks back, and we talked a lot. We talked pretty in depth about assessments, and it was really those paid assessments. And kind of the goal of the two assessments are just slightly different. That paid assessment is much more in depth. It includes some on-site time. And it's really geared towards, we're not sure what ERP is the right ERP for us next. And it doesn't even require the client to be on GP, although we see a lot of that. So it's really that where do we go next approach, where this free assessment is kind of more concentrated, honed in on, we're on GP today, and we're pretty sure that BC is going to be a fit for us, and that's where we want to go, but we just want some confirmation. Does that sound kind of reasonable how you understand it as well?
Absolutely. Great way to summarize that. Yeah, it's definitely, again, we've done these for many years, so it's very common for us. The free assessment is just something that was launched about a month ago. But you're absolutely right, Jeremy. There's more depth to the paid assessment approach. Definitely different paths or different next steps that can materialize from that. Whereas that free assessment's more of a just kind of laying the groundwork for some things around, what customizations you have, integrations, how many companies, user securities, things like that, the basics around your setup. So we can, again, start to, part of that deliverable is just, kind of reflecting our recommendations on what to consider for that migration path.
All right, very good. So the process to get through this free assessment really is kind of a limited engagement, a couple of hours, and there's a number of questions that we go over. What we're really trying to figure out is how do you have GP configured today, and how are you using it? How much data do you have? How many companies? Things like that. How well have you maintained your system over time? So we asked some very specific questions to hone in on those things. Business Central is a cloud product. GP is an on-prem product. So we do take the opportunity to ask about the environment, disaster recovery, what you're doing there from a technical standpoint, just so that we can understand from an IT stance where you are today and kind of where you're going to go down the road. We want to be able to head off or answer any questions or address any concerns with this change in philosophy of the on-site to the cloud. And at the completion of that, what we're really delivering then is this presentation of findings. So really this confirmation that Business Central is a good fit or not a good fit. Jason, if they do the free assessment, Microsoft's going to pay for that. Do they have to go to Business Central?
No, absolutely not. It's agnostic, so it certainly can help us understand and help you understand if Business Central might be a good fit, but it's more it's more on the sort of that initial discussion with respect to your current setup and things to consider, which could apply to migrating to any different system.
All right, so Jason, what I did is I extracted and kind of rebranded what would be a typical proposal coming out of one of these free assessments. I wanted to walk through that real quick to kind of give people a preview of what they could expect to see at kind of that end of that week-long process or so. So just for everybody's knowledge here, on this title slide here, I throw this logo up for Cronus. This is the demo company inside of Business Central. So like we're used to Fabricam or the TWO company in GP. This is the company inside of Business Central. So any screenshots, literature, documentation that we use, we take out of that demo company, just so we're not making visible any client information. So the title slide, and then really because this is a Microsoft-based approach and we're really looking at a Microsoft solution in most cases, we spend some time talking about Microsoft as a whole and what makes Microsoft that platform the right platform. The number of organizations, the number of users, kind of that centralized approach, right? Being the trusted leader in business applications and low-code solutions is really the key point here. Most people are on Office 365 and working on Windows-based systems, whether they're laptops or servers, and they've really embedded themselves within the Microsoft stack.
And Jeremy, I'll add here, you asked about, is it automatically geared towards Business Central? One thing we've seen, and we've done some assessments over the last couple of years for many GP clients prior to the free program, and rarely do we see Business Central not being a fit. Doesn't mean that the clients have always chosen Business Central, full transparency, but generally speaking, a vast majority of the GP clients we've talked to, and including our own clients, are definitely a fit for Business Central. So whether that's an automatic sort of, hey, that's our number one option, or more of a, we got to go and look at a variety of different systems. Just note that typically Business Central is a good option overall, even if it's included in multiple other software vendors that you're evaluating.
On that note,
Yeah,
can
that's
I
fair.
chime in?
Yeah.
For both of you. Kim has a question that's kind of related to this topic. So if there are large portfolios of operating and financing leases, subject to ASC 842, is Business Central, she put best choice, but within our risk adverse environment, I'm not going to say best choice, but can Business Central handle a large portfolio like that?
Yeah, absolutely. Go ahead, Jason. I'll let you go, and then I can add on.
Yeah, I was going to say, generally speaking, yes. Of course, we'd want to have a little bit of scope discussion around that, but in general, that can definitely be a great fit. And we've actually worked with other companies have a similar structure with a portfolio, whether it's a capital investment a company or just a family of companies rolled up under an umbrella, and a variety of different ways that you can structure that and certainly benefit or leverage that cloud model, as well as the flexibility and licensing and configurability within Business Central.
Yeah, and Kim, I see you posted another question there about equipment and auto fleet loans. Business Central can handle that, but like on the GP side, Business Central, Microsoft really had this same approach to having this core application. There's maybe some argument about, does GP do more or less than Business Central or vice versa? Without a doubt, we know that Business Central doesn't do payroll and GP did, so maybe there's a little bit of leverage or a hand up there. But we still have this ISV approach. In Business Central, Kim, we call them extensions. I would say if we have large portfolios, we'd 100% need to evaluate exactly what we need to do and how and why. But my guess is there's a handful of really reputable products on the market that we would look to use. The difference between GP and Business Central is those extensions are built inside of Business Central. So we're not leaving to go to another site. We're not leaving to go to another application. We're working inside of Business Central. So, and that's why we call them extensions, because we're just extending that functionality rather than replacing it with another solution. Those are great questions. But yeah, I would say it's a great fit. And I think when we look at business size and fit in general, if you were a fit from a revenue and a transactional standpoint in GP, you're 100% a fit on the Business Central side. So no changes there. Maybe even with Business Central, we extend that functionality a little bit, or those limits.
Yeah, that's always that tricky word. It's been on a few of our Business Central webinars, and I might not capture it correctly. Extensibility. So instead of customizing the base code of your ERP system, which makes upgrades harder to do, the extensibility options, those ISV solutions, etc., they connect securely with the Business Central base code, but it's not changing that base code, correct?
Correct.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
The best analogy I've been given on the Microsoft add-ons or the extension tools that we add is if you think of like the App Store on your iPhone or Google Play on an Android, where you have thousands and thousands of applications out there to choose from that can be very specific to a need that you have, whether it's a game or something to monitor your health and fitness or something, your steps. I don't know why that just came to mind, but with the app source for Microsoft, all of those applications that are available for a variety of 365 products, including Business Central, are vetted by Microsoft. They are approved from a technology standpoint. As Sarah mentioned, they're tightly integrated into Business Central. And that, coupled with the native configurability of Business Central, allows for great scale of the system. So you can see a system set up today with Business Central that could be vastly different in 5 years, 10 years, depending on how your company evolves and the tools that you may add into that environment. But going away from those old on-prem days where you have concerns around upgrades and patching things together and spending a boatload of money each year to kind of upgrade a variety of different things, or even every couple of years because you might be behind, those things typically go away in these modern cloud environments, including, of course, Business Central. And that's due to the configurability and the fact that these extensions are designed specifically for Business Central. And so again, as Jeremy mentioned, it's a seamless sort of back and forth. You're within the same environment. Everything upgrades at the same time. Microsoft requires that to be a part of that app source and a part of the selection of tools that you can have.
Excellent. And Jason and Jeremy, let's we have some complex questions from Olympia. Let's talk through those with that final polling question. So we can talk through some of that, but let's can we dive back into what you're going to get with the technology assessment?
Yeah, I'm gonna buzz through some of this because I've included some screenshots here, just where we talk about why the move to Business Central is a good move, working smarter, adopting faster. For many years we talked about simplicity being key, and specifically when we looked at year-end close, the closing process in BC much simpler than GP, and that mantra's kind of followed throughout the system. Things in BC just a little bit easier and simpler than in GP. We review based on your requirements, kind of a very high level project plan, from something very complex to something very simple. What's part of that go live? What do we need to do to get there? And that can be as comprehensive or as basic as you need it to be. The more comprehensive we are, the more we're able to kind of foresee things coming and plan around any potential roadblocks and things like that. So I know our approach here at Forvis Mazars is to be as detailed as possible, just to ensure that the client gets what they want by the time that they want to have it. So and then lastly, a couple of screenshots I don't think we have in here, but as a part of this presentation as well, Jason's going to go over with you or the team here, obviously a very high level budgetary estimate. So from a dollar an hour standpoint, not just from a consulting, but on your side as well, it's important that you know and understand how much effort your organization is going to have to put forth.
Absolutely.
Hey, Sarah, do you want me to answer Olympia's questions first, or do we want to talk about after the presentation, kind of what happens?
We'll circle back on some of those. Quentin, if I can tap you in, can we unhide the rest of that section 3 deliverables? Because I hid in the essence of time the deliverables, the proposal, the implementation estimates breakdown. And I think that to Jeremy's point, that's going to be important to showcase here.
Yeah, so thank you. Part of having a successful implementation is really having a good project scope too, and understanding what goes into the project, what's covered and what's not. So what we try to do up front, and what your partner should do up front as well, is really identify, what's part of the core ERP, what are those ISVs and integrations, and then any notes that kind of are outside of the ordinary or maybe different than a standard implementation, and calling those things out up front. And we should know what those things are at the end of that short period as a part of that free assessment. And then the thing that everybody really wants to know is that implementation timeframe. I will tell you, any numbers that you see in this slide deck are purely fictional. An 800, 900, 1,000 plus hour implementation, you're talking manufacturing, distribution, complex, not basic AP, GL, AR type stuff. So those very high number of hours are complex things. Typical time frame, anywhere from less than 6 months to 9 to 18 months, depending on the complexity. Probably we see kind of a good mix between the two. And then just that hours breakdown. And we approach it really from the high-low, but then also trying to call out how many hours should you guys expect to work and put into this project as well. And you can see some things on the end of the partner are significantly lower, like acceptance testing and training. On this example, I threw in 70 to 80 hours there, and very common, a client will spend a couple hundred hours beating up the system and making sure things work the way that they want it to, so that when that go live date rolls around, there are no surprises. You want to know and understand that system's going to work for you. It's going to be flawless, and that you're going to be able to do your job on day one. So in order to do that, we just got to put in some effort to make sure we get to that point. To add to the cost is also the licensing side of this. So the other number is really the consulting side. But then there's the licensing cost as well. So Core Business Central, and I'll let Jason talk a little bit about the cost of Core Business Central as it relates to the rest of kind of the ecosystem that's out there. But the ISVs, so those extensions that we're going to use with Business Central, they all have their own cost structure as well. With those ISV solutions, with a lot of them, there's kind of this one-time upfront fee to get things implemented. That would be included in the overall budget, so not in addition to. We account for that upfront. And then what are those monthly costs from that point forward? We want to make for sure that there's complete visibility into what you're paying for and where that money's going. Jason, you want to add a couple comments about just Business Central licensing costs for the core product?
Yeah, Jeremy, absolutely. Thank you. So with Business Central, as you can imagine, Microsoft has tons of products in the market. Obviously, we all know Microsoft Office, Word, Excel, Outlook, SharePoint, Teams, things like that. And so with that said, it affords Microsoft the ability to really be one of the most affordable licensing structures for a cloud ERP system on the market. I think hands down over some of our primary competitors, we're always going to be on the lower side from a licensing standpoint. So for a financial package, you're $70 per user per month. And that doesn't include if you want to add a limited user for $8 per user per month, which can really help balance those who are maybe not posting new data, but just need to kind of review or move some data along versus paying for a full license for someone. And our teams and your partner should be able to help you set up your licensing from day one to ensure you're not overpaying licensing. So that's important across the board. Now, if you're using more service management, more in-depth manufacturing or warehouse or scheduling, planning, and a variety of those other things that might be found in a distribution center or a manufacturing center, you're going to be $100 per user per month. You will still have access to that $8 per user per month, and there's also a device licensing fee as well, where multiple users can use one device. Again, your partner, as us as well, will help you understand that as part of that assessment process on what your license structure may look like. As well as going, prior to you engaging in any project. The good news is with us and with most partners is you don't have to have that all figured out even before you start any of your implementation. You might want to have a good idea from a budgeting standpoint, but oftentimes we'll get into the weeds with you as part of those discovery sessions, and we can find, hey, for instance, you don't necessarily need 10 full users. You can have 8 full users and 2 of the $8 per user per month or some structure like that. Again, helping ensure that you're not overpaying for licenses, and then your total cost of ownership, especially getting into years 2, 3, 4, and beyond, after you've paid those implementation fees up front, your total cost of ownership is really attractive from a licensing standpoint. Now, keep in mind, this also includes, I know Power BI is listed on this slide, that Power BI is embedded with Business Central. It's a basic version. You can upgrade that as well. And then there's relationship selling, as Microsoft calls it, to where you may have opportunities to even get other applications for what they call as an attached license. So it could be even less than what you might see listed online.
Yes, and I just want to point out too, in the Business Central portion and then the GP portion, the user usage and your licensing, we can make that entirely data driven because there are those user logs within the admin portal for each Dynamics product.
Great point.
Yeah, and just to circle back real quick, Jason, when you talked about the device license, what we're really talking about is like hand scanners and tools like that, not laptops and workstations,
Good point.
correct?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay,
Yep.
awesome. All right. So Jason, let's say we go through the assessment and we go ahead and say that this client or this company is a good fit for Business Central, and they want to make that move from GP to Business Central. Once they verbally come back to us and say we're ready to move forward, and we want to do this, can you explain kind of like what that roadmap looks like from that point on, just at a very high level?
Yeah, exactly. Absolutely. And so again, I think one thing I wanted to reiterate that you said earlier, Jeremy, and some of the most important steps for you, for any client who's looking to migrate off an ERP system, is that those upfront discovery calls, the scope calls that we're having, setting up the proper demo environment for you, making sure that demo is interactive, and then of course going through the detailed estimate as well as the detailed timeline. The more you can share and the more we can learn, the better for everybody. Somebody years ago said, we're trying to avoid finger pointing during a project. As you all know, where you may or may not know, but there's a vast majority of ERP implementations that fail on some level. It could be as simple as, we're just not getting the most out of the system. We want to dig in further to the functionality, or it can be more on the catastrophic side. We've talked to clients who have said to us, and they're not our audit clients, but they said that we could not pass an audit right now based on how our system is performing and how things were missed during the implementation phase. So again, those upfront sessions that we're having with you, whether it's a free assessment, a paid assessment, then obviously the scope and discovery that goes into setting up those engagements is crucial. And just know that the more you can share, the better that process will go. Once we've come to an agreement, we of course will deliver everything into a statement of work agreement for you. It's very detailed. That includes our master services agreement, which is kind of that overarching agreement that can oversee a variety of different projects going forward. But most importantly for you is understanding that implementation statement of work agreement, which is going to have the scope detail, project management detail, billing language, and a variety of other things that you're going to want to review. But most importantly, you're going to want to go through that scope and look and make sure that we've captured everything that we've talked about, that's reflecting what your expectations are of that project. And then once all of those agreements are settled and finalized, then we'll obviously put those through for digital signatures. And we're generally, don't quote me on this, I mean, obviously things can change from a resourcing standpoint, but we are generally, 1 to 2 weeks after those contracts are signed, we're kicking off your project, whether it's a paid assessment or an implementation. You're getting introduced to your consulting team, our SMB practice leader, our delivery leader, and a variety of other processes that are involved with that project, and really setting the expectations for next steps and for your overall timeline. And I think, again, putting in that effort up front is only going to make things go as smoothly as possible. I mean, deploying an ERP system, an accounting package, or a manufacturing package, there's nothing easy about it, but you can make it easier, if that makes sense. Putting in that effort up front and putting in that work. And it's our job to help guide you through that process up front, and then getting to that kickoff and deployment. One thing I'd like to point out too, and I'm sure other partners do this as well, but it's important to make sure that you have the right support once you get to that cutover phase. So we always build in hours, and it was a couple slides ago, I think it was at the bottom of that estimate sheet that was in that little Excel snapshot, but we call it go live assistance, cutover support, even post go live support that we build in. So throughout the several weeks or the months that you're testing and training and learning and onboarding within your system, and things are getting configured and designed, at the end of the day, it all comes down to when you're in your production environment, you're working towards a month-end close, you're working on very specific functionality based on your, let's call it, user role within the system. And we build in those hours to make sure that we're supporting you through that first 30, 45 days, maybe 60 days, depending on the complexity, while you're in your new production environment. So obviously doing all the steps up front to get you there, that should be a very smooth process to cut over into your new system and to get into that first month or two. But at the end of the day, software and humans are complex. I think I said this on the last webinar I did, and so there's a lot of moving parts. There's a lot of pieces to consider. So make sure that you understand exactly what kind of support you're getting from a testing, training, as well as cutover and go live assistance as part of that project. And then, of course, the last bullet point here, we talk about ongoing support. We have a couple different models. For years, we've offered an ad hoc, a very flexible sort of you're only invoiced as you use support type model. We also have more in-depth managed services around all of your Microsoft needs, certainly in this case, speaking more specifically to Business Central, but that can include, your Teams environment, your Office environment, a variety of other 365 applications as well. Just note that at the end of the day, whether you're, just a two-person, accounting package shop, or several users in a more of a manufacturing or distribution type center, that ongoing support is important. Now, these cloud environments, once they're set up correctly, once they're configured properly, you don't need a lot of technical support. You shouldn't need a lot of technical support. We call it more functional support. So think of reaching out to us and saying, hey, we want to create a very specific dashboard. We'd love a little bit of assistance. Can we, carve out a couple hours for that? And that's absolutely something we would do. Or something like, we've got a couple new hires, we're expanding in a certain region, and we want to go ahead and offer a little bit of training for them.
Excellent. All right. So we are on our final polling question. So would you like to connect with our team to learn more about a GP assessment? So please select yes or no here. Also, if you're not ready to take that dive right now in this next 60 seconds, we do have a link in the webinar resources section that will take you to a form about that complimentary GP assessment. So there's a form on there that if you want to share it with your team and then fill that out when, give you a little bit more time frame of 60 seconds. But to our audience, thank you so much for hanging with us for 3.5 hours. We got a front row seat. Yeah.
Hey, can we answer Olympia's question? I told her we would answer it, and then we just kept talking.
Yeah, absolutely.
So Olympia asked two questions, or a question and then kind of made a point. But she asked specifically about if BC would be a good fit, or would we suggest Sage Intacct? One thing to be upfront about is, in addition to our Microsoft practice, we do have a Sage Intacct practice as well. Anything that we can do in BC, we can pretty much do in Intacct. BC being a better fit on the manufacturing distribution side than Intacct is. But for APGL fixed assets, both of those solutions are great solutions. And specifically, if you're working in GP today, probably the transition to Business Central may be a little bit easier, only from the standpoint of you're used to working with Microsoft and Microsoft technology. So going to Sage Intacct is going to be a shift on platforms completely. And then, from a GL transactions per year standpoint, the threshold there would be in the hundreds of thousands on the BC side before we would start to get concerned. And really, wherever we are on the BC side, Sage Intacct is going to handle very similar thresholds. Once we get near that upper limit, Jason, we're going to start to look at something like an enterprise level solution like F&O or something like that, right?
Yeah, exactly. And just to add real quickly on that BC versus Sage or even other systems, oftentimes it's that ecosystem decision process, right? So you're looking at, we're a Microsoft Office shop, or we're using a variety of other Microsoft tools, or you're looking at that licensing, as I mentioned, where some of the other systems may have a higher licensing or higher annual cost. So those are some of the factors. Generally speaking, it doesn't come down to very much specific functionality where you're seeing wins and losses on one side or the other, versus it's more of that big picture decision process.
All right, Sarah.
Yes, thank you. So we are right at time. So thank you to our fabulous presenters. Their contact information is here. We have it posted everywhere, so feel free to reach out. And that concludes our webinar today. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, guys.